Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto went to the galaxy he never knew existed. Naruto discovers a crashed starship outside his village and his life is forever changed. Under the unorthodox tutelage of a Sith Lord's spirit, he will learn the technology and history of a larger galaxy that he, and no one else from his planet, ever knew existed. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard! Chapter 4, Beginnings. Over 1 year has passed since the previous chapter. He missed and couldn't believe it. He actually missed most of the target. That wasn't supposed to happen, at least not to him. A 6-year-old Uchiha Sasuke stood a good distance away from one of the academy training posts and was frowning at it. He threw all 6 of his shuriken at once like he always did, he made the same dramatic pose like he always did, and he expected to see the same results as he always had. However, 3 shuriken hadn't even hit the post, another 2 had hit but barely, and the final shuriken hit the post but didn't embed into it. He continued to stare and frown, but it quickly turned into a glare. He ignored the cries of his fangirls as they tried to console him because he didn't completely hit the target. Despite trying to drown out the noise, he could still hear them shouting that he would get it next time. "I don't miss," he thought. "I'm an Uchiha and we don't miss." After all that practicing, he had done so poorly. He couldn't believe it. Was there something wrong with the shuriken? He thought. The day was sunny and there was no wind to speak of, so it couldn't have been environmental factors. It must have been something wrong with the shuriken. He convinced himself. When he threw the kunai, he might have to aim more carefully if there was something with them wrong too. Standing about 15 feet away was the group of boys in the class. They were all separated from the girls by at least 10 feet and standing quietly while they waited for their turn. Among them was Uzumaki Naruto who, if one could see his face, had the biggest shit-eating grin. He could hardly contain his own laughter at what he had done. It was just a simple manipulation of the force. Using a very basic application of force push to change the trajectory of the shuriken. He had to be subtle enough that he didn't move the weapons too much. He had used his right hand and faced it towards where Sasuke was aiming but kept the hand at his side. All he had to do was get the timing right and concentrate on what he wanted to accomplish. The use of his hand was more to focus on the area and objects that he wanted to affect and as a conduit for the force to go through. He had to make sure that no one saw him doing something strange though, so he didn't reach out his hand to better use the technique. Naruto was wearing a dark gray jacket that was unzipped and open, which showed that he had on a black high-collared shirt that mostly covered his face. The hood of the jacket was also up and it shadowed most of his face. He had black pants on, the standard ninja footwear, and black fingerless gloves. He was glad he had the hood and high collar as the other boys might wonder why he was trying so hard not to laugh if they saw him. He actually had to bite his lip to keep breaking out in chuckles. Naruto regained his composure, however. He would like to have said that he was able to overcome the urge to laugh, but the real reason was that Sasuke was preparing to throw his kunai. He needed to get ready and focused. Sasuke placed all 6 kunai between his fingers and prepared for his throw. Most other students threw one at a time, but he liked to show off. However, he didn't like to let others know that he liked to show off. He looked at the target and steadied his breathing. A moment later he threw. The kunai flew to the target as he took his famous dramatic pose. It's the pose where his head is down and arms back, sticking in air and forming a V. He waited only a moment to hear the results, which were a series of clangs and a dull thud. He nearly fell over in shock, and standing not too far away, Naruto nearly doubled over while holding his sides and trying not to laugh out loud. Sasuke looked up a moment later to see a single kunai sticking in the post, the rest were on the ground around the post. What happened? It doesn't make any sense, he thought. A few of the other boys snickered and Naruto desperately tried not to laugh out loud. Sasuke stared at the target in both anger and confusion. The Chunin instructor, a Funino Daikoku, came up to Sasuke and asked if he was feeling alright, which made Naruto nearly lose it. The Chunin then suggested that perhaps Sasuke should have tried throwing them one at a time and not all at once, to which Sasuke scowled but reached into his ninja pouch and took out another kunai. He tossed it at the target with a smirk, but it hit the ring of the only kunai embedded in the target and bounced off. Now thoroughly embarrassed, Sasuke left the throwing area and went back to the boys' lineup. "I didn't do anything on that last one," thought Naruto as he tried not to laugh out loud again. He managed to get over his laughter until he saw who was coming up to throw next. It was Inuzuka Kiba. And now to add salt to the wound, Naruto thought with a devious smirk that also couldn't be seen. Kiba took his position and started throwing his shuriken one by one. To his astonishment, and everyone else's for that matter, they all hit the target post. It took Kiba a second to realize what he had done before he started shouting in triumph. Many of the girls booed him as they thought it was some type of fluke that he had beaten Sasuke. The now confident and smirking Kiba took out his kunai and managed to get each of them to hit the target as well. While the girls and Kiba shouted again, Sasuke was grinding his teeth together as he couldn't believe that someone had managed to beat him. He was an Uchiha and they were supposed to be the best. He had always felt inferior to his brother, but there was no way he was going to be inferior to anyone in this class. "Maybe you should take a few pointers from Kiba, Sasuke," said a disembodied voice, and the other boys laughed. Although none of them had thought of it at the time, they didn't know who had said it and no one would have recognized the voice if they were paying attention. A lot had happened since he had found that starship just over 1 year ago. Plagueis had introduced Naruto to his spirit form, and after the boy awoke from screaming and fainting, he had assured Naruto that he wasn't a real ghost and had no intention of haunting him. After that was over, Naruto took Plagueis' holocron in a backpack that Naruto had found in the ship, and they went around Konoha to look for a place to set up a base or training area. Any area that was in the open or near even low traffic was completely out of the question. They investigated the Hokage mountain, as it contained many emergency shelters in case the village was attacked. Most of the shelters were suitable for training, but if the village were attacked, then the area would be discovered and the village could be attacked at any moment. There was no room that was secluded from the other areas in the shelters. Plagueis was looking for an area that was no longer used and not even widely known about. They managed to find only one such area inside of the village, which was the backside of the faces on the monument. Though they didn't know it, when the faces were created, the area where the face would go was hollowed out with earth jutsu to provide the materials for form the face. The faces weren't actually carved, but created with earth jutsu. This left hollow areas behind the faces that few were aware of and where no one went or used. Naruto already possessed a routine of going up to the top of the Hokage monument heads and watching over the village, so few would think twice if they saw him walking up there. There were several buildings on the top of the monument, but they were set back from the edge a good distance and tree cover was around. It took a while, but they had found the entranceway into the space behind the faces. It was normally locked, but a small usage of the force from Plagueis was all it took to gain access. Plagueis had found the area to be well suited for what he had in mind. There were many rocks of different sizes strewn on the floor that could be used, and the area was very flat. It was also secluded, and from examining the area, he could tell that no one had come there for some time. The four faces of the mountain provided for separate rooms to put whatever they wanted in. Seeing that it would be difficult to move everything that Plagueis had wanted taken out of the ship because of the water, they went shopping. When Plagueis had been speaking to the Kyuubi, he had used a bit of his mind tricks and persuasion on it to have it divulge more information than it normally would have for an intruder in the boy's mindscape. Initially, Plagueis had tried to talk with the creature, but the Kyuubi had been very tight-lipped about answering his questions. As time went on in the mindscape, and with the application of a few force abilities, the Kyuubi unknowingly revealed more and more to him. Information about the boy and his parents, information on the ceiling, and a good amount concerning chakra and ninja in general were all revealed to Plagueis. It may have been a powerful creature and filled with an incredible amount of hate, but its mind wasn't very strong-willed, nor were its mental defenses against his subtle use of the force. Plagueis was very skilled at manipulation and mind control tricks, so it wasn't very hard for him. Once he found out that the large creature was trapped, he could have tried to take more information but was content for that moment. It would be best not to anger the creature and hamper what he had established. Some of what he had learned during that long talk was the reason that they were headed to one of the many ninja supply stores in Konoha. Naruto had been very apprehensive about entering any of the stores, but Plagueyes had assured him that everything would be fine. Naruto was still wearing the backpack with the holocron in it, so Plagueyes could talk with the boy through telepathy, and he had taught Naruto to not verbally reply when other was around. Eventually Naruto would be able to reply to him with his own telepathy, and they would find better accommodations than carrying his holocron around in a large backpack. Naruto had nervously entered the store and the person at the counter had instantly recognized him. The man was about to do something when he stopped and had a dazed look on his face. Naruto had felt something, but he wasn't sure what had happened. Plagueyes told him to take the opportunity and look through the aisles. The owner just stood behind the counter with a dumb smile on his face while Naruto shopped. Plagueyes examined the variety of weapons that ninja used. Really, they had been here to purchase several storage scrolls, but why waste the opportunity? They picked out several sets of weapons, the storage scrolls they were originally after, and standard ninja pouches. Sets of new clothing were chosen, in colors that did not involve orange, and Plagueyes told Naruto to look at the swords. Eventually, the boy would wield a lightsaber, but that was many years off. Plagueyes did have an idea which they could try in a couple of years when Naruto became more advanced in the Force, but for now, they looked for something normal. The store had a small selection of blades and of different quality. While Naruto was amazed at the variety, as he had never been inside of a weapons shop before, Plagueyes was systematically narrowing down the choices. The katana was obviously too long for the boy, and even in years to come it still would be. The sword which bore the label wakizashi could have been right for him, as well as the ninjato. The tantos were a little too small, and while there were several other blades, they were too unique and couldn't be used with the sword styles that Plagueyes was going to teach him. After narrowing down the choices, Plagueyes informed Naruto of the options, and the blonde chose the straight-bladed ninjato. They took the merchandise to the counter where the still smiling owner stood. The man totaled up the amount, and before Naruto could ask Plagueyes how they would pay for it all with the money he bought, the owner knocked off over 70% off the price. As Naruto packed up his new equipment, he had asked, "How did you do that?" To Plagueyes, who responded, "Weak minds can be easily confused or bent to the will others. That which you saw wasn't very difficult to perform." "Will you teach me that?" Naruto asked, and Plagueyes responded, "Yes, in time I will teach you that and more." It was mostly a lie though, as Plagueyes wouldn't be teaching Naruto mind control or force subjugation, but just the regular mind tricks. Naruto smiled at the statement as he packed the rest into the backpack and sealed the sword into one of the scrolls. It wouldn't do for him to walk the streets displaying a weapon. It took a while for the confusion to wear off and the owner to stop selling things at ridiculously low prices to anyone that walked in. The next day, Naruto became a student of Plagueyes, and he was to call him Master from that day forward. Master Plagueyes had immediately started teaching Naruto, getting him to first feel his two powers and tell the difference between the two. Naruto practiced basic manipulation of the Force, and they experimented with chakra. This actually led to several discoveries. While trying to use his powers, his connection to the Force and chakra were like oil and water. They always stayed separate, and it wasn't possible to combine them into one power. However, when he channeled the Force, he also channeled some of his chakra without knowing it, and the opposite also happened. When he channeled only chakra, a little of the Force was channeled as well. Naruto was completely oblivious to what was going on, but Plagueyes could feel it happening and was very intrigued. It proved that Naruto might be able to control them simultaneously, perhaps with very interesting results. Plagueyes wasn't sure exactly how chakra could help Naruto's Force powers, but he had several ideas on how the Force could be used to augment jutsu. He was eager to find out in the coming years. Naruto would first need to acquire and learn jutsu, but that wasn't exactly a problem in a village full of ninja. If they couldn't get jutsu through regular means, then they would buy it, steal it, or take it from the minds of others. Plagueis had long ago learned patience from his own master, but he was having difficulty reining in his thoughts and curiosity on the matter of chakra, jutsu, and their interaction with the Force. Training had resumed for Naruto after the slight digress from Plagueis' schedule, in which he taught Naruto to start feeling for and trying to use both powers at once. It was important to investigate such a discovery, but Plagueis knew he would have plenty of time for that later, and as much as he was interested, he had to control his emotions and feelings. He still had plans to set in motion and a new student to train. They had a lot of ground to cover, especially when it came to Naruto's mind. Plagueis had started having Naruto meditate while holding his holocron. Touching the holocron would allow Plagueis to have a better connection with Naruto when they entered his mindscape. With a little experimentation, Plagueis found that the difference between the boy's mind and the outside world was close to a factor of 60. 60 seconds on the inside for every 1 second that passed on the outside. It was almost equivalent to an hour of study for every minute that passed on the outside. Naruto wasn't anywhere near a genius, but Plagueis' thoughts on intelligence were that, unless a person had some kind of illness or mental handicap, they could learn anything. It would just take varying amounts of time from person to person and the willingness of the individual to learn. Therefore, he was sure that Naruto could learn everything that he planned to teach him. While Plagueis would not teach him all the force powers that were at his own disposal when he still had his body, he would make sure that Naruto had a powerful mind and enough abilities to get by. He would teach the boy how to protect his mind and how to think more like a Sith, and then move on to force powers. The problem that the boy currently had wasn't really stupidity. It was that he was so focused on the village and becoming Hokage that he didn't care about anything else. He didn't care about reading or learning or listening. He also got bored rather easily. In truth, he didn't care about anything that wouldn't help him on his way to becoming Hokage. However, Naruto didn't actually know what things would help him be Hokage. No one had ever explained something like that to him. He'd focused on such a faraway goal that he couldn't see the steps and path to get there. The effect made it seem like the boy was at a much lower intelligence because he was oblivious to many things that happened around him, and even some basic knowledge was not known to him. Not having anyone to properly teach him was another inhibitor. The boy lacked basic interactions with others and was easy to manipulate. The only focus that the boy had for training was that he had to train his body. Naruto had no plans to ever train his mind or even read a single book. He only knew that he needed to train and become stronger, but he had no idea how to train himself and how to become stronger. No one had ever explained that to him either, and if they had, he probably didn't realize that it was important and disregarded it. The strongest person wasn't the most intelligent or the one that was the most physically strong or powerful. It took a blend of intelligence, physical abilities, and power to make a person stronger than others. On an average day, Plagueis would spend around 3 hours inside of Naruto's mindscape teaching him basic knowledge. It may not have seemed that much, but 3 hours on the outside was equivalent to nearly 8 days on the inside of the boy's mind. Plagueis started teaching Naruto how to read and write in Galactic Basic Standard, as well as the basics of mathematics, science, engineering, the history of the galaxy, history of the Jedi and Sith, information about the Force, and teaching him about the starship. It was a great deal of information, but Plagueis had 8-day increments to teach Naruto these things. Plagueis was aware of how much time it would take to teach Naruto everything that a Sith acolyte should know, but with the mindscape training, he would have all the time he needed. The only thing that Plagueis valued more than his research was his own knowledge. His master had even called him Plagueis the Wise because of his vast knowledge on so many subjects. He was a firm believer that knowledge was power and was always trying to learn more about the galaxy and the Force. Therefore, he had much more knowledge than most Jedi or Sith on just about any topic, and was planning to teach Naruto as much as he thought the boy would need in order to further his plans. Back in the real world, Plagueis spent the remaining hours of the day working on Naruto's physical training and force training. Plagueis was teaching him a martial arts style known as Terraskasi, which was basic for steel hand and was an old style that was developed by a group of people to specifically fight the Jedi. What better style for a Sith than one which was specifically created and adapted over thousands of years to fight Jedi? The style was specifically made for speed and anticipation of strikes and included teachings for the user to be able to close off their mind from mind trick or other mental-based attacks. Plagueis started Naruto on an intense training regimen for his body but quickly found himself making revisions. He had assumed what he thought Naruto's physical aptitude and abilities would be but was wrong in his assumption. Plagueis had worked Sidious into the ground while training his student, but Naruto had far more stamina and recovery abilities than what he was used to in a regiment that he deemed as hard, barely winded the boy. He also found that he had to keep increasing the regiment as Naruto kept growing accustomed to the current level of training. Despite the problems, Plagueis was very pleased with the discovery. In a few years, he believed that Naruto would easily be able to outlast almost any opponent that he faced in the galaxy. Using the ninjato, Plagueis had started teaching Naruto the basics of several Sith styles of lightsaber combat. The ninjato was a perfect substitute as it was a straight blade and was the perfect length for Naruto to use. Eventually, Plagueis might also teach Naruto several of the Jedi styles so he could better combat them if they ever encountered a Jedi in the future. Starting out with just basic manipulation of the Force, Naruto started showing great aptitude for telekinesis. In just a few short months, he was already pushing and pulling objects, and he could make several objects float in the air around him while meditating or doing a handstand. Naruto had very good control over the Force, but he lacked that good control over his chakra. Plagueis had also worked on stealth and trying to hide both of Naruto's signatures. It appeared that ninja weren't able to sense the fact that Naruto had any other power besides his chakra, or at least they hadn't come across a ninja that could sense it. Plagueis had decided that he wouldn't teach Naruto in the same way that he taught Sidious. Sidious was taught to hate Plagueis and he had taken away everything that his student enjoyed as well as making him face all his fears while also teaching Sidious to control and harness his emotions. The same training wouldn't be done with Naruto as Plagueis didn't want his acolyte to gain too much power and destroy him like Sidious had tried to do. Therefore, he had settled for gaining the boy's trust and loyalty while still working on controlling and harnessing emotions and removing his fears, but to a lesser degree. Plagueis had no real attachment to the boy, but he was an interesting subject to study and teach. He wouldn't make the same mistakes that he did with Sidious. To better travel and keep an eye on his acolyte, Plagueis had Naruto get a storage seal tattooed on the skin on the underside of his right forearm. Plagueis then had Naruto seal his holocron into it when Naruto was going out of their hiding area or out of his apartment. That way, Plagueis could stay with his acolyte and observe everything that happened while still keeping in contact. Unless the skin that the seal was on was destroyed, Plagueis would remain safely inside of the seal and Naruto wouldn't have to carry around a pyramidal-shaped object wherever he went. Plagueis also had Naruto get a customized bracers to wear over his arms to better protect the seal. They were made for someone who was a few years older than Naruto, but neither was planning to get into any fights in the meantime. While sealed in the storage seal, Plagueis' holocron was technically always in contact with Naruto, allowed Plagueis to access the mindscape as Naruto if holding the holocron. Plagueis could also have his spirit move inside and outside of the seal at will. Now Plagueis was far more mobile as he had Naruto to take him wherever he wanted to go. He also had the same influence outside of the seal as he did when someone was near his holocron. After a year of learning and training, Naruto found that he was already ahead of the students at the academy. He had learned 2 of the basic 3 academy jutsu while the others in his class hadn't even started learning them yet. It seemed, however, that he was unable to perform the 3rd standard academy jutsu, the Bunshin no Jutsu. Plagueis believed that it was a result of Naruto not having enough control over his chakra and the fact that the amount of chakra that Naruto had kept increasing at a much faster rate than anyone else in his class. After much work and meditation, Naruto had been able to create 1 clone, but not any more than that, and he would overload the jutsu, creating multiple flimsy clones or ones that looked dead. Plagueis planned on finding something else that the boy could use as they learned from the academy teachings that there were multiple clone jutsus that were more advanced. Plagueis had been very interested in the substitution jutsu as well as the transformation jutsu. The Force had similar techniques to the henge, but they weren't nearly as easy and simple to use as the chakra-based technique. The substitution jutsu, however, was far more interesting to Playguys, as apparently it could allow someone to change places with a nearby object and escape death, or even change places with another person. Such a technique would be incredibly useful to have, and he wished something similar could be done with the Force. That such techniques were considered to be at the lowest level when they could be so useful and easy to use was rather fascinating to Playguys. The similarities were also interesting, as two of the basic Academy jutsu had mirroring techniques with Force users. He was now even more interested to further his knowledge of ninjutsu and perhaps discover what other similarities there were. Playguys still wasn't even sure how chakra was produced or affected the body, as the explanation given during the Academy had been rather basic and didn't explain anything that was actually taking place inside of the body. Besides those findings, the Academy had become rather boring unless the Chunin teacher was lecturing about new topics that didn't involve history. Naruto had already read through all of the Academy materials that the students were provided, and on his master's order, had even broken into the Academy to find other information and materials to learn from. He didn't end up finding very much though, but learned it all anyway. A visit to the Konoha library didn't turn up anything of interest, as the village apparently separated the civilian and shinobi materials. After some investigation, they had found out where the ninja library was. Interestingly enough, it was in the Hokage mountain and not far from their hideout. Naruto ventured up the long staircase to the archives but was stopped by a guard at the entrance. Apparently, you needed to have clearance from the Hokage or the required ninja rank to get in. Playguys hadn't tried to gain access by using any mind tricks on the guard because he could feel if other people were inside and wasn't sure if he could trick all of them before someone noticed and wondered what was going on. It was too risky at the moment. The only other places that he might be able to get jutsu were from the ninja clans or the Hokage, but Playguys wasn't about to have Naruto go trespassing and stealing jutsu from them. Naruto had already asked as many questions as he could during class time in the academy. The instructor eventually had told him that he couldn't ask any more questions, especially ones that were so far ahead of the class lessons. Most of the questions were ones that Playguys wanted answered, but the information that the instructor was currently teaching was so far behind what Playguys really wanted to know that the instructor wouldn't interrupt the lesson to answer the advanced questions. For the most part, Naruto was completely ignored by the Chunin teacher in favor of another student who the teacher was positive were more gifted. That student had yet to really show much potential that would garner such a declaration, and Playguys believed it was just because of the clan that boy was from. In fact, Naruto was actually at the top of the class, but was purposely being ignored by the instructor in favor of Uchiha Sasuke. While Playguys would admit that the Uchiha was talented, the boy had a penchant for showing off and wasn't doing as well as Naruto in all of the academy subjects. The academy situation was a problem because that meant that they would have to wait for several years in order to gain more knowledge and instruction on chakra and jutsu. While Playguys was patient, Naruto had already exhausted all of the knowledge that the academy was willing to provide to someone at his level. In the future, Naruto would be able to either break into the places that had the information they wanted or gain access to them through rank. Since Naruto was already learning at a very accelerated rate, it wouldn't be long before he completely outstripped his classmates and students ahead of his grade level as well. Playguys had thought that Naruto would be noticed as an outstanding student and arrangements would be made to have him moved into a higher grade to not hold him back. Apparently, he was wrong, as the Chunin instructor was a rather weak-minded fool that held the Uchiha clan in very high regard. Instead of waiting patiently, Playguys decided to act. Naruto sat in his regular seat at the academy. The room was empty as class had ended several minutes ago. Standing across from Naruto was his Chunin instructor Funino Daikoku, and he wasn't looking very happy. Naruto had purposely gotten into trouble by creating a disruption during class and had insulted Uchiha Sasuke. He knew exactly what buttons to press to antagonize Sasuke, as well as Daikoku, and nearly started a fight between himself and Sasuke. Daikoku broke up the fight and told Naruto that he had to wait after class so he could speak to him about his detention. Daikoku walked up to the desk that Naruto was sitting behind, and before he could go on a tirade about how terrible it was that Naruto had insulted the noble Uchiha clan, Playguys struck. Playguys' spirit form came up from the floor behind Daikoku, and before the Chunin even knew that something was wrong, Plagueye's hand extended forward and grasped the Chunin's head. Any words that the instructor had to say were stopped and his eyes became unfocused. Naruto wasn't exactly sure what his master was doing to the Chunin, but he really didn't care. Minutes elapsed until the man's eyes became focused again. Plagueye's took the short moment of confusion and disorientation that the Chunin experienced to sink back into the floor. Daikoku looked around and noticed Naruto. He smiled and said with a cheery voice, "That will be all, and don't let it happen again, young man." The man then walked out of the room and headed down the hallway. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the Chunin's actions and said in his mind, "What did you do to him, master?" Plagueye's voice came back clearly in Naruto's head, "I just made a few arrangements. Now come, let us go back to your house and wait to be summoned." Naruto was confused and Plagueeye sensed his confusion but did not elaborate, and Naruto knew not to question his master as all would be revealed in time. He packed up his materials and left for his apartment. Naruto didn't know who would summon him, as the only person that would do something like that was the Hokage. Was that where Daikoku went? He wondered. Hokage Tower, 20 minutes later. Daikoku had headed straight for the Hokage Tower after leaving the academy. He knew exactly what the problem with Naruto was and exactly how to solve it. Stopping at the Hokage's secretary, he managed to get an appointment to see the Hokage and only had to wait 10 or so minutes. The secretary informed him that the Hokage was now free and he walked up to the double doors and knocked. "Enter," came a voice inside and Daikoku stepped inside the office. He greeted the Hokage and sat down in a chair in front of the old wooden desk. The Sandaime was rather curious about why the teacher had visited him. He hoped it wasn't about Naruto as he was already busy enough and didn't need any more of the boy's pranks. Although, now that he thought about it, he hadn't heard about Naruto pranking anyone for a while. "What exactly did you need to see me about, Funino-san?" asked the Hokage while he smoked his pipe. He didn't mind a break from his paperwork and only hoped it was good news. "Hokage-sama, I came here to talk to you about one of my students. Uzumaki Naruto," stated Daikoku seriously. The Sandaime repressed a frown and a heavy sigh. "I knew it." He though and wondered just what Naruto had gotten himself into. "And what exactly has Naruto-kun done this time?" asked the Hokage and blew out some smoke away from the Chunin in front of him. "Lately he has been acting out in class and I believe I know the reason for it," stated Daikoku, and the Sandaime raised an eyebrow. He knew exactly why Naruto always acted out but was curious as to why Daikoku would bring it up. "I believe that Uzumaki-san is not suited for my class," stated Daikoku, and the Hokage had to suppress a groan as he had thought that he picked a teacher that wouldn't be discriminating against Naruto, but before he could say anything, the Chunin continued, "I think he needs to be moved up a grade." Finished the Chunin. To say that the Sandaime was surprised was an understatement. His pipe nearly fell out of his mouth. Several thoughts went through his head as he studied the instructor before him. Is he trying to get Naruto out of his class by moving him forward in grade because he knows that I won't let Naruto be kicked out the academy? Does he plan on putting Naruto into a grade that he isn't ready for to discourage the boy from being a ninja? The Hokage asked, "I suppose you have good reasoning for this change?" It's highly unusual to have students graduate early or move up in grade during peacetime. "Yes, I understand, but I believe that the boy is more advanced than the other children in his grade. He really doesn't seem to care much about the lessons. I've also noticed him acting out and distracting the other students, possibly because he's bored," said Daikoku. The Sandaime just looked at the man in front of him strangely and wondered if it was a good idea to have him teaching at the academy. Naruto, more advanced than the other students? He questioned, as it really wasn't something that he had ever considered. Most of the other students came from clans and were actually heirs or heiresses to those clans, which meant they had training as well as better education than most. The Sandaime never would have expected a teacher to come and tell him something like that about Naruto. He had always known Naruto to be rather slow and having a very short attention span. It made him wonder about the teacher and why he would think such a thing. Naruto had always acted out and tried to get attention, and his limited attention span was obviously causing him to get bored in class, but to be bored because he was more advanced than the other students? Before the Sandaime could say anything, Daikoku continued, he has also started asking very advanced questions during class which are well ahead of what I am currently teaching. I actually had to stop him from asking questions because I just wouldn't be able to stick to my lesson plan if I answered all of them. As of this moment, Uzumaki-san is the top student in the class and his grades speak for themselves, said Daikoku, and he handed his grading sheets to the Hokage for him to look over. The Sandaime sifted through the grading sheets for this year and he noticed that Naruto had scored at the top of the class in nearly every subject. The Sandaime wasn't able to keep the surprise off his face. Naruto's grades weren't perfect, but they were close and better than the rest of the class, which was saying something as it had so many sons and daughters of clan heads. Is he really that much more advanced? He thought, and he remembered that Daikoku had taught Uchiha Itachi while the boy was briefly in the academy, so it was possible that the man knew what he was talking about when it came to a gifted student. Naruto wasn't anywhere near as gifted as Itachi, but he was definitely ahead of the class if the chunin before him and the documents were anything to go by. A student that wasn't learning anything because they already knew the information might act out, get bored, and even distract other students. That was certainly true. The Hokage thought over what had been presented to him. From what he was seeing, it appeared that Naruto was far more gifted than he had originally thought. He thought perhaps that the files had been doctored and that the chunin had it out for Naruto, but that didn't seem to be the case as the instructor seemed genuinely interested in Naruto's development. The Sandaime also didn't want to hold Naruto back if he was excelling in his lessons and surpassing all of the children of the ninja clan heads in Konoha. It was peacetime in the village, but that didn't mean that he couldn't skip Naruto ahead a grade. It required the recommendation from the teacher, the Hokage's own approval, and the agreement of the child or guardian of the child. It was unusual, but if Naruto was willing to get advanced to the next grade before the other students in his class, then he would agree. Naruto could always be put back in the same class if things didn't work out. The Hokage considered Daikoku's recommendation, but he would need to talk with Naruto first, so he sent one of his ANBU to get Naruto. It appeared as though his master's plan was in motion as Naruto made his way to the Hokage Tower. He wasn't sure what exactly was going on yet, but he was slowly piecing it together from what he knew. This could be some kind of test from his master, and he intended to figure out as much of it as possible before everything was revealed. Plagueis wasn't forthcoming at all with any details concerning what he had done to the chunin instructor and what was currently going to happen. It was a lesson and he was trying to teach Naruto to make conclusions off the details provided and by using the force. So far Naruto knew the plan involved the academy teacher and the Sandaime. Naruto's first thought was that his master would get the teacher replaced with one who would answer all of his questions. This theory didn't seem correct though, as there could have been numerous ways to get the teacher fired and they didn't involve needing to speak to the Hokage. Naruto hadn't had much interaction with the Hokage since he had met his master. He had met with the Hokage to discuss his entrance to the academy, but only a handful of times after that. Plagueis had instructed Naruto on the best choice of words to talk to the Hokage, and Naruto had put up the best mask that he could. It wasn't wise for the Hokage of the village to see a change in Naruto's personality or notice anything strange. The Sandaime also didn't have much time to talk with Naruto as he had been rather busy with village business, especially with the Uchiha clan. Unknowingly, this had worked in Plagueis' favor as it gave him valuable time to bring Naruto over to his side. Naruto entered the office and sat in one of the chairs in front of the desk. The Sandaime hadn't seen Naruto for a while and was curious about his change in clothing. Daikoku had informed him that Naruto had become more serious during the months that he had been an academy student. It wasn't until he got bored that he started goofing off and distracting the rest of the class. The clothing certainly made Naruto appear as a ninja and much more professional, despite that he was a first-year academy student. The Sandaime was curious as to what brought up this change, but perhaps the realization of being a ninja had set in a little early for him. Most academy students don't realize what they were getting into until after they graduate. They still had whimsical notions of what ninja are and think the profession is full of adventure. The reality was that they were child soldiers and the profession would be dangerous and difficult no matter how long they had been doing it. Few students ever grasped this until after they were put through the Chunin exams or went on a mission that was more dangerous than it was ranked. Many never grasped it as they dropped out or failed to graduate and were never really aware of how their belief differed from reality. The boy sitting before the Sandaime was very different from the boy that he remembered the previous year. Something must have changed. The Sandaime thought as he tried to think of what it could have been. He hadn't seen much of Naruto since before he had joined the academy. The only thing that he knew which happened was when he left the village and nearly drowned in a nearby lake. It definitely could have been a life-changing experience. The Sandaime originally thought that Naruto was fine as he hadn't developed a fear of water and was even eager to learn to swim and get over that experience. Perhaps it did affect him, but in a different way. He could be taking his life more seriously now that he has had a near-death experience, thought the Sandaime. As to why Naruto was wearing darker clothing and mostly covering his face, the Sandaime didn't quite know. "Well, you've certainly altered your wardrobe," said the Sandaime as he broke the brief silence. "Isn't this what a ninja is supposed to look like?" responded Naruto, and the Sandaime chuckled slightly. He was thinking that Naruto had probably taken the looks that other ninja had and put them all together. The high-collar shirt was reminiscent of the Uchiha clan, while the jacket from the Aburame clan. He couldn't peg down the rest to a specific clan or ninja, but it was definitely a ninja look that the boy achieved. "I had an interesting conversation with you, teacher, Funino-san, just an hour ago or so." "Do you know what he wanted to talk about?" asked the Sandaime as he was curious whether Naruto might know something or if Daikoku had told him anything. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" asked Naruto with a slight bit of curiosity. The Sandaime gave a small smile and replied, "No, you aren't in trouble. He came to tell me that you are at the top of your class and excelling at nearly all your subjects. He had nothing but good things to say about you. During class he only ever has good things to say about Sasuke." Naruto blurted out, and he could feel a mental nudge from his master as that had not been a very good thing to say. Plagueyes wasn't going to actually talk to him as that might divert Naruto's attention. The last thing they wanted was for the Hokage to think that Naruto was hearing voices. The Sandaime nodded at the response from Naruto and thought about why that was. It could be that he doesn't want to alienate himself by supporting Naruto. It does seem strange that he would favor one student and not the student that deserved it, thought the Sandaime, and he picked back up the grading sheet. Uchiha Sasuke wasn't first in the class or even second when considering overall scores. He was actually in third place with Aburame Shino and Yamanaka Ino tied for second place. The coveted Rookie of the Year title was given to the top student in the class, but it was weighted more heavily with practical ninja subjects counting more than the theoretical. Considering the weighting factor, Naruto was still first place with Sasuke and Ino tied for second and Shino in third place. Naruto definitely had a small gap between himself and the other top students in the class. Looking back to Naruto, he noted that the boy was more patient than he had known him to be, but still wasn't able to sit still in the seat. "How are you doing in the academy? What I mean to say is, do you find the subjects and material rather easy?" asked the Sandaime seriously. Naruto thought about what was said for a second and started figuring out why he was really there. Plagueyes stayed silent as he waited for Naruto to put everything together. "Well, it's kinda boring. I've already gone over all of the material for the rest of the year and I've tried to ask questions about more advanced stuff, but the teacher won't answer them anymore. I tried to find some more information at the library, but they didn't have anything and I couldn't get into the ninja library," said Naruto absent-mindedly. The Sandaime thought about this and was surprised that Naruto had tried to find more information about being a ninja. He didn't think that the boy had ever set foot in the library, but apparently he was wrong. Thinking it over, the Sandaime concluded from both the teacher and the student that Naruto was more advanced than the other students in the class. It didn't seem right to hold him back if he wasn't learning anything, as he didn't want Naruto to get discouraged at a young age. "I know you've only been in the academy for a couple of months, but how would you feel about skipping ahead a grade? You would be given all the materials but would have to catch up to the rest of the class, because they would be ahead of you. What do you think, would you like to skip ahead? The Sandaime asked. Naruto just smiled behind his collar. It seemed that this year was going to be more interesting than he had originally thought. Plagueis smiled inside of his seal on Naruto's arm. His mind control on the weak-minded Chunin had worked. He might have to do the same thing in the coming years to get Naruto out of the academy faster, but they would work on that when the time came. From the information that they had gathered, the ninja library was only open to ninja Chunin rank or higher, and even at that rank, a Chunin could only look at so much in the library. Even if Naruto skipped ahead a few grades, they would still have trouble getting what they wanted. Another option could come along, but Plagueis wasn't willing to wait for something that may never happen. The best way to start getting and learning about jutsu was to get Naruto out of the academy. The missions that ninja went on could provide many opportunities to gather more information and techniques, especially since they would be outside of the village and away from the majority of prying eyes. From what they had found out during lectures at the academy, ninja typically worked in a four-man group with one ninja that was the leader and higher in rank than the others. This wasn't always true for other missions, but it was the standard for genin squads. This meant that instead of an entire village, they would only have to worry about a few pairs of eyes. Plagueis was also thinking about other methods for Naruto to gain more knowledge and also fighting experience. He had come across one, but it would be several years before he could be sure that Naruto would survive. He also had plans for Naruto to create a personal weapon of his own. The ninjato wasn't a bad weapon, but it could only take so much damage and fighting before it wore out. There was also the problem of finding fuel or a new power source for the ship and making sure it wasn't damaged. Not to mention that it was still at the bottom of a lake. These plans were all in the future though. For now, they wouldn't attract too much attention and learn what they could from the academy while Plagueis continued to train Naruto's mind and body. Chapter 5, Progress, It Has Its Price. 2 years have passed since the previous chapter. Naruto is 8 years old. Sitting in a tree and spying through a set of third-floor windows, was an 8-year-old Naruto. He could see that the first exam was just about to end. The genin that didn't make the exam were filing out of the academy as they wouldn't be able to proceed to the next stage of the Chunin exams. Naruto was gathering information because his master wanted him to infiltrate into the second stage of the Chunin exams. He was wearing a larger coat than he wore 2 years prior, but, other than that, had on the same clothing style as before. The second stage of the Chunin exams was a battle between teams in Training Ground 44, which was also known as the Forest of Death. Plagueis wanted Naruto to sneak into the exams in order to obtain a scroll from one of the genin teams that was trying to pass. Each team was given single scroll of a set and they needed to get one of each scroll to pass the exam. They had 5 days in the forest to do this and they couldn't open the scrolls. Naruto knew that his master was testing him to determine through a real-life situation where Naruto's skills were at. The test was also a chance to gain valuable information and fighting experience. Although the participants in the exams were all genin, they still had many different jutsu and techniques that could be useful. His master had recently taught him a force ability that could be used to take knowledge from another person. All Naruto would have to do was find a genin squad that might have jutsu and defeat them. If he killed them, he wouldn't be able to gain much knowledge from them, so he had to knock them out and keep them alive. He planned to use stealth and cunning over power to defeat 3 genin. That was the reason why Naruto was spying on the participants. He wanted to determine which ones would be a good target and might have jutsu that he could use, as well as get an idea of weaknesses. It never hurt to gain as much information as possible. Master Plagueis was still back at the hideout as this was something that Naruto would accomplish on his own. Naruto would take his master's holocron with him into the forest by placing it in the seal on his arm, but Plagueis would only intervene if his student was about to die. Naruto's attention was diverted from the genin when a flying ball of cloth smashed into the academy windows. Naruto blinked as he stared through his goggles and wondered what was going on until a woman was revealed and the cloth turned out to be a large sign. He stopped himself from sweat dropping at the sight and pushed his goggles up to rest on his forehead. There was no other information that he could gather, as the exam was over. Naruto was actually quite a good distance away from the academy and was using a pair of goggles that he himself had created. They were an interesting piece of technology that he had crafted from a very large pair of electro-binoculars that were in the spaceship. He had taken the binoculars apart to find out how they worked, and then combined the technology with a pair of smaller and lighter goggles to make something that was better than both. They were light and easy to use while being just as good as the electro-binoculars, with the same vision and magnification power. With a little modification to the power source, he had made them powered by a chakra battery, which were commonly sold in ninja villages, and converted chakra from the user into electricity. He had found the original electro-binoculars far too heavy and bulky for his use, so he created his own pair using all of the knowledge and teachings that he had learned from Master Plagueis. Naruto had asked his master why the binoculars were so heavy and large if the technology of the galaxy was so advanced. Plagueis responded that they were large because they had to accommodate numerous species, and if they made them too small, then the company wouldn't be able to sell them to so many customers. As for the weight, he explained that they were incredibly durable and that people didn't buy something unless it was a little heavy, as it could be a knockoff brand or just rather cheap. Naruto had accepted the explanation but still thought it was odd. Technology was supposed to get smaller and lighter, not the other way around. He was very satisfied with his new goggles though. He was just about to leave his spot in the trees and prepare for tonight, when he both felt something and saw something out of the corner of his eye. It was a Konoha genin sitting against a fence a little way away from the academy. He was talking with a jonin, possibly his sensei, and had probably just failed the exam. The boy looked rather down and Naruto really didn't care, but something the jonin said had gotten quite a rise out of the genin. Naruto could feel the boy's emotions through the force. He felt elation, surprise, and hope. Now curious, Naruto pulled his goggles back down and focused on the scene. The goggles didn't have any kind of function to tell what they were saying, and Naruto couldn't read lips, but, in this case, he didn't have to. Using the force, he was able to concentrate on the area that he wanted and hear the conversation as it wasn't that far away. A normal ninja wouldn't have been able to hear what they were saying, but Naruto was far from normal. He listened closely as the jonin told the genin about an alternate method for passing the chunin exams. It involved stealing an object and scroll from the Hokage Tower. Naruto was now very interested in this conversation, as he could tell that the jonin was lying and manipulating his own student. Not only did the student believe him, but he was ready to steal those objects from the Hokage to prove himself. How pathetic. Naruto thought, and he couldn't believe someone could fall for that simple trick. Naruto was supposed to go back to his apartment to prepare and then stop at the hideout and take his master's holocron with him. However, this new information was too good to pass up, and he made a change in plans. Instead of heading for his apartment, he headed straight for the hideout and did his best to make sure that no one was following him. Since his student left to gather information for his test that night, Plagueis had been in deep contemplation. His thoughts ranged from his current situation, his student, and the future. Unfortunately, his current situation hadn't changed very much in the past 3 years. He was out of the starship though, and learning all that he could about ninja and the mysterious energy known as chakra. By sending Naruto into the Forest of Death to retrieve a scroll from a genin team, Plagueis planned to see just what kind of level that his student was at. It was difficult to tell, as he, without a body, was unable to test his student himself. It could be incredibly dangerous, since Naruto would have to go after a squad of genin and not individuals. That was one of the reasons why Plagueis would go with him. He would be there to protect his investment, but not to give any advice to his student. Naruto would have to come up with a plan, because they both knew that he might not be able to face 3 genin at once, especially if their teamwork was good. In the past 2 years, Naruto had continued to grow at an impressive rate. Sidious had been a prodigy and Plagueis had trained him to the fullest, but Naruto was absorbing everything that he taught and progressing through sheer willpower and hard work. Plagueis still held back on his training of Naruto, though, as he didn't want to violate the rule of two, but his curiosity kept getting the better of him and he found himself teaching Naruto a little bit more than he should have. During his 7-year isolation on the ship, while under the lake, Plagueis had ample time for introspection. He examined why he had died and the events that probably lead to it. What he found was that during his time as a Sith Lord, he had moved away from the main goal of the Sith, which was galactic conquest. He had also stopped monitoring his apprentice, and that led to giving Sidious more than enough time to plot against him. Plagueis had focused more on his research and knowledge than the proper goals of a Sith Lord. He had strayed from the teachings of the rule of two, and through the historic method of ascension, Sidious had taken his place. Plagueis still felt angry about how it had happened and had plotted revenge for a time. He thought he had put those feelings behind him, but as he saw his current student progressing and realized the potential the boy could have, he found himself thinking about getting revenge on his former apprentice and using Naruto to do it. His body was, for the most part, destroyed. Sidious had used force lighting on his corpse for a prolonged period and probably destroyed any hope of recovering any usable DNA. Cloning was difficult as it was outlawed in the Republic and required great knowledge in order to successfully make a clone. It was also very difficult to create a clone of a force-sensitive person, as it could result in mental instability, but Plagueis wasn't worried about that since he only sought to create an empty clone or just a body for his spirit to inhabit. He knew that without any usable DNA, he wouldn't be able to create his original body and may have to use some other body. That brought its own problems, as a different body might not be able to contain his spirit as well as his original body would. The body could break down over time and he would be forced to transfer into a new body over and over again. Possession was out of the question in the long run, as that had an even shorter time span than using a different clone body than his original. Cloning was the best prospect for what he was thinking about. It was problematic, but still better than his current position. It would take a while to gather the needed resources and technology, but it could be possible. They would first have to get off this planet and back into the galaxy in order to make any such plans fruitful. As Naruto became more knowledgeable from his teachings, they were able to go back to the ship and work on diagnosing the possible problems that the ship had and looking into the fuel problem. From what Naruto could tell from the ship's computer and his own inspection, the bottom of the hull had several microcracks from impact and would need to be fixed. The ship could still fly and travel without the fixes. However, there existed the possibility that the forces exerted on the ship from acceleration and space/atmospheric travel could cause those fractures to expand and propagate, which could lead to catastrophic failure of the hull. It wasn't something that Plagueis was willing to risk. In order to fix the microcracking, the ship would need to be removed from the lake and repair work performed on the underneath of the ship. They would need some place to keep the ship until that time, and they would need to move the ship away from the ninja village without anyone noticing. It was a difficult task, not impossible, but difficult. They would need to move a 30-meter-long ship that didn't have any fuel out of a lake while less than half a mile away was a ninja village as well as patrols in the area. As of yet, Plagueis wasn't completely sure how to do it. The fuel that the ship used was not something exotic like hypermatter. The ship was actually powered by a chemical reaction that produced enough energy in the reaction chamber to power the ship. The reaction required the mixing of two complex chemicals that formed a very energetic reaction in the reactor chamber of the ship. One chemical was already present in the reactor and the other was fed to the reactor in a steady amount to propagate the reaction. The chemicals were rather complex, but it was possible that the planet had the required resources and technology to properly create them. Plagueis wasn't exactly sure what the chemicals were called, but the ship's computer contained the chemical composition for each, so they would just need to recreate those chemicals. The raw resources would have to be found, which might not be that hard, but they would have to experiment with combining those chemicals to find the correct ratio and formula. Then, larger amounts of the chemicals would have to be manufactured. So, they would need a lab as well as a place to create the chemicals. That was also difficult, but not impossible. At the moment, Plagueis was still at a loss concerning how they would go about fixing these problems, but he had a feeling that if they waited, opportunities would come. In the meantime, he would continue to train Naruto and increase the blonde's knowledge so that they would be able to act at a moment's notice when an opportunity did show up. Naruto had actually been far more interested in the teachings that Sidious disliked. Sidious hated to learn about droids or any kind of machine and wasn't interested in any devices besides his lightsaber. Naruto liked to tinker with just about anything he could get his hands on. Plagueis had to keep him away from the medical droid and the ship, otherwise Naruto would have already taken the droid apart or tried to examine sensitive systems of the ship. Sidious also didn't care much about history, whether it was the history of the Sith or just the galaxy in general. If Sidious didn't see any value in it and for his future plans, then it didn't concern him. Only the holocrons and Sith texts that Plagueis had collected and inherited were of interest to Sidious and only for the power that they could provide. Naruto, however, was incredibly interested in every bit of history that Plagueis was willing to share with him. He spent hours inside of his mindscape listening to his master talk about the galaxy. It didn't really matter what it was that Plagueis talked about because Naruto enjoyed listening to all of it. The blonde did have a certain fondness of information concerning Darth Revan as well as the Jedi Revan. They were the same being but two different people with completely different goals and thoughts. Revan was once a Jedi but fell to the dark side and after losing his memory, came back to the light side of the Force. Naruto cared nothing for his own history that was taught at the academy, only the history about the galaxy that his master taught him. Naruto was also interested in the ancient civilizations such as the Rakitans and the Gree. Plagueis knew more about Rakitans than most other people in the galaxy. The Republic had erased all knowledge of the ancient civilization that had once ruled most of the galaxy. The Rakitans were a force-sensitive species of amphibian humanoids that developed force-powered technologies to explore the galaxy. It was even possible that they created the hyperdrive technology that was still used thousands of years later. They used this technology to conquer and enslave parts of the galaxy. The Rakitans weren't able to visit anywhere they wanted as the unique force-powered technology could only visit planets that were strong in the Force. Little was known about the exact reasons for the species' extinction or near extinction. At some point, they were apparently no longer able to use the Force and lost all the planets they had conquered. By the time Lord Bane, the founder of the current Sith line, had visited their home planet 1,000 years ago, the species was gone. Naruto found it very interesting that the Rakitan hyperdrive was later modified and used by humans to explore the universe. They used a different power source for the device and were able to go just about anywhere in their starships. He also learned how people of different species had slowly populated most of the galaxy. It was likely that one of those ships had made it to his own planet and somehow ninja and chakra came about, though neither Plagueis or Naruto had any idea how that had happened. The Gree were another ancient civilization, only they were still around but had lost most of their technology. They were a race of gray cephalopods with 6 tentacle-like arms. Gree technology was created as a piece of art as much as a piece of technology, and it took great practice and training to use most of their incredibly technology. Unfortunately, over the many millennium that they existed, the people who had this knowledge failed to pass it on to the next generation and they eventually had no idea how to use most of their amazing technology. No one else could use it either and despite trying to use it, they never were able to rediscover how to operate them. Naruto found just about everything that his master told him about the galaxy fascinating and he couldn't wait to one day see it firsthand. Besides training Naruto's mind, Plagueis had also guided Naruto's force training, physical training, swordsmanship, and working with chakra. While inside several of the Chunin teachers' minds, Plagueis had gotten a hold of different methods to train Naruto's chakra control and had the blonde work on all of them. Naruto had yet to gain many powerful jutsu and only had the Academy 3 as well as the few other E-rank and D-rank jutsu that were available at the Academy. Naruto had learned all of them and was desperate for some elemental jutsu. He had only spent a cumulative 3 years in the Academy but had been skipped ahead a grade 3 separate times. During one school year he had been skipped ahead twice. He was already in his 5th year of study and only had a single year left before he graduated. Unfortunately, what he learned at the academy really wasn't enough to satisfy either master or student. Both wanted to learn much more about jutsu but didn't have a very good way to gain this knowledge. They would have to wait another year before Naruto could leave the academy. In the meantime, Plagueis had started teaching Naruto the basics of Sith alchemy. Sith alchemy was an ancient practice that involved numerous different methods of augmenting or creating objects and altering living beings. Applications for Sith alchemy could be strengthening and augmenting weapons and armor, genetically enhancing different species and making it easier to control them, or even creating objects and potions with unique functions, such as the amulet that Naruto had encountered years before. This practice was far older than the beginnings of the modern Sith Order and dated back to the original Sith species thousands of years in the past. Over that time, it had been perfected to be an incredible science that was useful to those that were able to wield it. Alchemy required more knowledge than force ability, so it was something that Naruto could definitely learn in time. Plagueis doubted that Naruto would ever be able to use the more biological aspects of Sith alchemy, but he believed that Naruto might benefit from learning about how to create objects or augment weapons and armor. One of the plans that Plagueis had was to have Naruto create a weapon for himself using Sith alchemy. Unfortunately, the exact methods to create ancient Sith swords had been lost over time, especially after both Sith and Jedi had switched to lightsabers. While the forging methods had been lost, the augmentation information had not. The scrolls and books that had been taken from Plagueis' quarters by the gunrunners were all on the topics of Sith alchemy and its uses. The midi-chlorian manipulation that Plagueis had been working on before his death was also connected to Sith alchemy. Plagueis had also been studying several amulets in his spare time in order to perhaps create his own. Sith amulets had many different powers that they could be imbued with. Some were for healing, protection, understanding languages, and helping to channel the dark side. Plagueis had searched for several examples and found 3. He hadn't actually touched 2 of them because he could tell that they had been cursed in some manner using Sith magic, which was a very different practice altogether. The third necklace that Plagueis had, which was not opened by the gunrunner and remained in its sealed box, was for understanding the ancient Sith language. Plagueis had found it decades before, and it had helped him understand everything that was written in the scrolls until he eventually taught himself how to read and write in ancient Sith. Plagueis had already started teaching Naruto how to read, talk, and write in the ancient Sith language. Over the course of his life, Plagueis had become a master of many aspects of Sith alchemy, and with his knowledge, he planned to teach Naruto what he would need to know to augment a weapon with alchemy. Normally it would have been a problem, since the method of forging a Sith sword had been lost, but that was where the second holocron came into play. The second holocron that Plagueis had with him was actually an ancient Jedi holocron. He had found it and kept it while trying to access its information. Most of it was still not accessible to him because he was not aligned with the light side of the Force, but he was able to access information about creating a Jedi sword. Before the Jedi used lightsabers, they actually forged swords using metal, a furnace, and the Force. They had the same connection to those blades as they did lightsabers, and the blades were similar to those made by the Sith. Eventually both sides stopped using swords in favor of lightsabers, but Plagueis always had a fascination with the archaic and at one point had wanted to make a Sith sword or at least something similar to it. That was why he held onto the Jedi holocron, despite it not providing any other useful information to him since. He would have Naruto use the Jedi forging methods and the augmentation properties of Sith alchemy to create his own weapon. Most swords created using the methods of the Jedi were nearly indestructible and could even block a lightsaber. It would definitely be a good weapon for Naruto to have, at least until he had the materials to create a lightsaber. Plagueis had spent several months going over all the information that Naruto would need to know in order to create his own sword, and it wouldn't be very long until he would be able to try and create one. The village had many furnaces that could be used, and Naruto didn't require that much knowledge of forging a weapon, as he would use the Force to guide him. They had been debating about what metals to make the blade out of and even what extra features, if any, that the blade should have. Naruto had wanted to take apart one of the vibroblades that was on the ship and use the vibration technology to make his sword sharper and perhaps make it powered with chakra. Plagueis had suggested some metal off the ship as well as the chakra metal that ninja used in some of their weapons. It would cost quite a bit of money, so Naruto had been saving up to buy the metal and by the use of the furnace. It was better than using mind tricks, as people would ask where Naruto got the sword from, but he could just answer that he had made it himself. They might ask how, but no one could force him to answer. The technique to create the weapon could be considered as something that Naruto invented himself, and that would mean that he was protected from answering questions about it because it was similar to jutsu creation. If someone created a new technique, then they were under no obligation to tell anyone about it and were protected as if they had a patent on the technique. It was at that point in his thought process that he felt his student approaching their hideout. Naruto entered the hideout and knelt on one leg before his master's holocron, which was sitting on top of a pedestal made from the stone in the hideout. "Master, during my spying on the exam participants, I came across something and thought I should tell you," spoke Naruto with his head down slightly. Plagueis' spirit form appeared above the holocron. "Tell me," stated Plagueis as he was rather interested in what this development could be. Naruto didn't go against his orders unless he felt it was important. Naruto lifted his head and looked at his master's projection. "During my spying I came across a jonin that was consoling his genin student on his failure to pass the exams. He spoke to his student about an alternate method to pass which involved stealing several items from the Hokage Tower. One of which was a sword and the other a scroll. The jonin mentioned that the sword belonged to the Nidaime and I think it could be the right gene. Nothing was mentioned about the scroll or what it contained. Everything he spoke about the test was a lie, but the other information he gave, about the items and their location, seemed truthful," stated Naruto, and he could feel a small amount of surprise and interest coming from his master's spirit. Plagueis' thoughts were already moving through possible scenarios to get the sword. Ever since he had heard the sword's existence from one of the lectures at the academy, he had been interested in it. It wasn't every day that a sword with a blade made from pure electrical energy was mentioned on such a low-technology planet. Plagueis was instantly curious about it and had Naruto ask several questions about the blade during class. Unfortunately, it seemed that most ninja only knew basic information about the blade and nothing specific. They knew about the electrical energy and who had used the blade in the past, but really nothing more. It was also known that the blade was somewhere in the Hokage Tower, but that was it. Naruto had heard not only the location of the blade, but a plot by a ninja of the village to use his own student to steal it for him. The scroll that came with it could be important as well, but it could also be something that wouldn't be important to them. The problem was to what to do about the information that Naruto had brought. Plagueis obviously wanted the blade, but they would need to get it in a way that didn't implicate them in any way and made others take the fall. They would need to hide all involvement in the theft, which could be difficult as ninja could track scent as well as chakra. They knew exactly what time that the boy would be stealing the right gene and scroll. Naruto could wait until after the theft and then intercept the thief. He could also wait until later on and intercept the thief and his sensei together, or he could do something completely different. There was also an opportunity with the Jonin sensei, as he should know many different ninja techniques as well as have at least one or two nature affinities and have worked on the training for those affinities. If Naruto could incapacitate the Jonin, then they could gain valuable information from someone that was a traitor and was expendable. Plagueis did find it odd that a genin would be able to get into what should be a very secure facility, but the directions had been simple enough and the Jonin had provided his student with the patrol schedule and where the traps were located. The only thing left to do was to decide on a course of action. Naruto arrived an hour before the genin was supposed to get through the ninja patrols and take the two items. Naruto planned to get to them before the genin could. He didn't know if the genin would be able to get the items, and if he couldn't then they would be placed under better security, so it was best to use the information provided by the jonin to get there first and make sure he was able to acquire the sword. Getting past the guards was far easier than either Naruto or Plagueis imagined it would be. Naruto was trying to suppress his chakra and even using his force powers to help suppress it. He was also using a very basic jutsu to actively eliminate any scent trail that he might leave behind. Naruto silently made his way down the shadowed hallways of the Hokage Tower. He could sense where the guards were as Plagueis had taught him how to properly sense ninja with the force. It was difficult to learn, but Naruto was able to accomplish it. The trick was to sense a void in the force, which corresponded to a ninja whose chakra was preventing the force from entering his body. The patrols were moving exactly how the Jonin had said they would. Naruto found the room and the door wasn't even locked. Entering the dark room, he knew where the traps were and made sure not to set them off. The room was some kind of library or study, as it had bookshelves on most of the walls and a desk in one corner. He went to the wall that a secret room was supposedly behind and which held the items they were after. Naruto found the hidden mechanism and triggered it. A part of the wall swung open to reveal the room, and Naruto made sure to not set off any of the alarms at the opening. A handle to a weapon was sitting in a display case along with a scroll. Naruto stared at the handle. It reminded him of something that his master had described to him many times. Over the shared link, Naruto asked, "Master, is that a lightsaber?" But he received no answer, as Plagueis' mind was a jumble of thoughts concerning this new development. Naruto was about to say something else when he felt his master urge him to complete what they were here to do. Before he left, Naruto pasted an exploding tag to the wall at the entrance of the library room. He had timed how long it took him to get past the guards, into the building, and into the secret room. Ninja were always punctual, and that would work to his advantage. Naruto walked down the street while wearing a dark cloak. The cloak was a survival cloak from the ship. He decided to use it to further hide his features while stealing from the Hokage Tower. Naruto was traveling to an apartment building. The specific room that he was looking for belonged to Rokusho, who was the jonin that wanted his genin student to steal the items from the Hokage Tower. As Naruto went through a shadowed area, he emerged in the henge of the genin that Aoi had convinced would become a chunin upon successfully taking the items he held. That genin was named Marino Idate, though Naruto didn't actually know that. It was still 20 minutes or more before Idate was supposed to infiltrate the Hokage Tower, so Naruto had plenty of time for what he needed to accomplish. Walking into the apartment building, he headed for a specific apartment. The henge Naruto found the correct apartment and knocked. It took a moment before Aoi answered the door and came face to face with his student, who was supposed to be stealing a scroll and sword for him in just a little while. Aoi was of average height with green spiky hair and blue eyes. He was rather surprised to see his Idate at his home when he opened the door. Did he back out? Has he figured out the test was a fake? Aoi thought as his arm went for a kunai behind the door. If his student wasn't going to steal for him, then he would have to silence his student and make sure no one could find out about his treachery until it was too late. Before Aoi got the chance to get to the kunai, Idate held up his hand as if to say stop, and Aoi was launched back against a wall in his small apartment. His blurred vision no longer saw his student standing in the doorway, but that of a cloaked figure reminiscent of an ANBU but with no porcelain mask. Aoi tried to get up and went for his weapons. He had no idea what was going on, but something had gone wrong and he needed to get out of here. The cloaked figure stepped into the apartment and held up his hand again in a gripping motion. In an instant, Aoi couldn't move his body. His hand still had several kunai in it that he had been about to throw. It was as if some unseen force was holding him in place and not letting him move at all. He couldn't even breathe or call out for help, and it was slowly squeezing him harder. The cloaked figure walked towards him and the apartment door closed behind him without any help. While still immobilized, Aoi tried everything that he could think of to break loose. He thought perhaps he was in a genjutsu, but when he tried to dispel it, nothing happened. Though he was a jonin, he was terrified at this point and thought he was going to be killed. He watched helplessly as the figure stopped just a foot away from him. He couldn't see any eyes as the cloak shadowed the face. The figure's other hand lifted up and went to Aoi's head. As soon as it made contact, Aoi felt pain and everything started going black. Naruto exited the apartment building out into an alley and made his way to his own apartment building. Looking at his watch, he noticed that he was a little early and had to wait for the right time. A minute passed before Naruto made a single hand seal, and in the distance he could hear the faint sound of an explosion. He walked up the stairs of the building. His apartment was on top of an unlocked his front door. The explosion was timed to coincide with the moment that Aoi's genin would have entered the Hokage Tower and found the same secret room that Naruto had. At some point between getting the secret room open and realizing that the items he was supposed to acquire were already gone, Naruto detonated the tag. It was very unlikely that the blast would have killed the genin, since Naruto was rather sure of the timing. It was just to alert all the ninja in the area that something had happened in the Hokage Tower. They would all come running and find a genin in a restricted area and 2 items missing. Naruto had thought about stealing more items from the tower, but he only had information on the layout and traps set in the room that Aoi had talked about. It was possible that he could have been caught if he had ventured elsewhere. It would take some time to interrogate the genin and find out what he was doing there and what was going on. After that, ninja would be sent to find Rokusho Aoi and reach a dead end. Naruto took off the cloak and hid it, along with the sword, scroll, and several other items taken from the Jonin's apartment, inside of a secret compartment that he had created in his apartment. It already had several other items that he didn't want anyone to find if they searched his home. He had thought of going back to the hideout, but if anyone saw him near the Hokage Tower, they would no doubt question him. Naruto had no idea what was involved with a ninja interrogation and wasn't eager to find out. The Sandaime sat behind his desk as 2 men entered the room. One of them was Marino Ibiki, older brother of the genin that had been caught not 20 minutes earlier and a high-ranking member of the ANBU Torture Interrogation Division. The second was Yamanaka Inoichi, the head of the ANBU Torture and Interrogation Division. It was technically a conflict of interest to have Ibiki work on a case concerning his own family member, but the man was known for being a professional no matter what the circumstances were. Were the items recovered? Asked the Hokage as he wanted answers concerning who had stolen a priceless artifact that had belonged to the Nidaime. Inoichi stepped forward and said, "The items were not recovered, Hokage-sama. I have confirmed with a mind walk that Marino Idate was told by his Jonin sensei that he could pass the Chunin exams through alternate means. His sensei, Rokusho Aoi, told him where the Raijin and scroll were and how to get to them. Idate then infiltrated this building and attempted to steal the items, only to find that they were already gone. Then he was supposed to throw us off the trail, giving Rokusho-san more time to escape?" Asked the Hokage as he believed that Aoi had taken the items earlier and created a distraction in order to buy himself time to leave the village with the sword and scroll. "I'm afraid not. The ANBU found Rokusho-san in his apartment unconscious. It appeared as though there was a struggle, but there were no signs of forced entry to the apartment and no one seems to have heard anything out of the ordinary. The Raijin and scroll were not found at the scene and there was no evidence that Rokusho-san ever had them in his possession. It's possible that Rokusho-san knew his attacker and allowed him entry to his apartment, or the attacker entered through other means. Rokusho-san looked as though he was ready to go on a mission, but he wasn't scheduled for one. His bank account was emptied the day before, but we didn't find any money in the apartment or on his person. We took him back to HQ to delve deeper into the theft and what his involvement really was. Upon further investigation, with a mind walk, I was unable to find anything further," stated Inoichi seriously. The Hokage raised an eyebrow, as it wasn't often that Inoichi wasn't able to find anything. Unless Rokusho was dead, then he should have been able to find something. Inoichi saw the confusion and elaborated, "I attempted to enter his mind but found nothing." "Nothing?" the Sandaime asked in a confused voice. "Yes, Hokage-sama. I entered his mind and found nothing. No memories and no information of any kind," stated Inoichi, and the Sandaime could tell that the findings had surprised the clan head. "So, his memories are gone? What would cause that?" the Sandaime asked while trying to think of any techniques that he had heard or come across that could do something like that. "I'm not completely sure. While my clan does have knowledge of how to extract information, we don't have many techniques that can implant or erase memories. I can think of one forbidden technique that would completely erase a person's memories, but this would cause debilitating damage to the brain and leave the subject comatose. In this case, Rokusho-san is completely fine, apart from having no memories. He can still function and could relearn all that he has lost. I don't really see him as an enemy of the village anymore," said Inoichi. The Sandaime thought about what had happened and said, "Do you have any other information to report? Did the search teams find anything? "No, Hokage-sama. I really don't have much else to say. From what we can tell, No one entered or left the village, and we had several teams search the surrounding area for any signs of a fleeing person but found nothing. It's obvious that there was a third person that Rokusho-san may have been working with, but we can find no evidence of anyone else. Idate-san has no knowledge of another person, just his sensei. Finished Inoichi. The Sandaime sighed, as a memento of his sensei was now gone. The Raijin was a rather famous sword, but hadn't been used for decades. He was angry that it had been stolen, but even angrier that whoever it was that stole it had eluded everyone in the village. Not only that, but there was no one to punish for the theft. No one could be placed in the bingo book since they had no information about who attacked Rokusho. Marino Idate was only guilty of trusting his sensei, and Rokusho Aoi was no longer in his right mind or even had a mind anymore. It was a dead end. Any plans for Naruto secretly entering the Chunin exams were put on hold for another time. The sword, scroll, and all the information obtained from Rokusho Aoi's mind were far more important than anything else during the following day. It was a weekend, so Naruto didn't have school and could spend most of his time in their hideout. Ice had been left sealed on Naruto's arm and had spent the night sifting through all of the information that Naruto had ripped from the Jonin's head. Drain knowledge was a force technique that Plague Eyes had taught Naruto specifically for what it had been used it for the previous day. Naruto had taken bits and pieces of a variety of different topics. For those who had not mastered the technique, it is very possible to destroy the memories of the subject it is used on. In this case, it was done on purpose to hide any involvement with the theft. Aoi wasn't a ninjutsu user but did know the basics for learning water nature affinity. Naruto was eager to start learning. Unfortunately, the Jonin didn't know any water jutsu. He also knew very little about genjutsu, nothing more about the illusions than what Naruto had learned in the academy. Aoi had mainly used weapons and poison. The poison knowledge was valuable to Naruto as he now knew how to prepare several different types of poison from local plants. Besides that knowledge, Aoi knew several things about Konoha itself that neither Naruto or his master were aware of. The village apparently had a barrier surrounding it to detect anyone entering through any means other than the village gates. Plague Eyes was rather interested in the barrier system as he had never seen anything like it that didn't involve sophisticated sensor equipment that could be fooled. The barrier didn't have many weaknesses to it, and Aoi knew the password to get through it. Now Naruto knew that password. All in all, Naruto had learned many useful things from the Jonin but was left wondering something. He simply couldn't determine how Rokusho Aoi had been promoted to Jonin. The man wasn't really that dangerous or powerful and had very little in the way of ninjutsu, genjutsu, or even taijutsu. The only thing the man could use were weapons and poison. Somehow that had been enough to get him promoted. Naruto and Plague Eyes had envisioned Jonin ninja as being very powerful and proficient in most ninja skills, but it turned out that not all of them were. It made them rethink their previous notions and plans to take jutsu from the Konoha Ninja Library, as it didn't seem that difficult anymore. Furthermore, Naruto had managed to break into a building that was supposed to be one of the most secure in the village and stole 2 items from it without being caught. The traps that Naruto had bypassed weren't that difficult to notice or get around. After analyzing what they had found the previous day, they would have to reconsider several old plans that they the previous believed were too difficult to accomplish. They would definitely have to wait though, as the village would be on high alert for a while. Most of the day was spent with Plague Eyes having Naruto examine the sword in detail and activate it to see what it could do. The weapon sounded and activated like a lightsaber, but the blade was made from electrical energy. Oddly, the blade seemed solid and could cut, but only slightly better than a normal sword. It could also discharge the energy it held when coming in contact with someone, but it really wasn't that powerful of a discharge and probably would only stun a ninja for a short time. Naruto was only stunned for a brief moment. A civilian would most likely be knocked out by the discharge though. Naruto couldn't examine most of the blade because he couldn't find a way to open it up and see what was inside. Whatever was inside the blade and causing it to create the electrical energy was sealed inside, and unless he wanted to break the handle and risk breaking the sword, he wasn't going to be able to examine it any further. From preliminary investigation, Naruto concluded that the sword had a few interesting features but wasn't nearly as good as what Plagueis told him a lightsaber was. The cutting ability wasn't that impressive, but Plagueis thought that perhaps Naruto didn't know how to properly use the blade to its full potential. Plagueis could feel that Naruto's chakra was being used to power the blade, and it was possible that the chakra going into the blade could be manipulated to produce better results. Unfortunately, as Plagueis explained to Naruto, the blade wasn't very useful to them at this point in time. Naruto couldn't be seen using it, and since they couldn't find out how it worked, another blade couldn't be created, and it would be too suspicious if Naruto did create something similar. They would have to work on the discovery at a later date, preferably when they had the equipment to examine the inside of the device without damaging it. The scroll Naruto stole seemed to have the same problem. He couldn't open it. It was sealed in some way, and he just hoped that it wasn't a blood seal, which might involve blood from the Naidame, who had been dead for nearly 50 years. Plagueis, however, had a way around that. He touched the scroll and focused on using a force power called Piscometry, which was a rare ability that allowed someone to touch an object and see what events surrounded the object. This power would allow Plagueis to actually experience the events surrounding the object as if he was there with his own senses and feel what others felt who used the object. Plagueis had tried to use the same power on the Raijin but only found images of the Naidame Hokage using the weapon, and he couldn't view anything past that to see who had created the weapon and how. That probably meant that the sword was very old and had been used by many different people before the Naidame had ever started using it. Plagueis was by no means a master of Piscometry, but he could get some images and feelings concerning the scroll and Raijin. The scroll was much easier to see as only 3 people had ever come into contact with it, the Naidame, the Sandame, and Naruto, and it wasn't created that long ago. The contact with the scroll from Naruto and the Sandame was minimal, so it was easier to see the other person who came into contact with it. The scroll had been written by the Naidame and contained all of his water jutsu. It was supposed to be presented, along with the Raijin, to a ninja of Konoha that showed a similar talent and affinity for water that the Naidame Hokage possessed. Since the man's death, nearly 50 years prior, no one had ever shown the same skills for water jutsu that the Naidame had, and thus the scroll and sword had never been passed down to someone else. Along with witnessing the creation of the scroll, Plagueis could also see the set of hand seals that was required to open the lock on the scroll. Naruto went through the required hand seals and the scroll opened. Looking through the long list, Naruto found every water jutsu that the Naidame Hokage had ever used or invented. Naruto had a broad smile on his face as he could now start training to use water nature chakra with the information from Aoi's mind, and he had a list of powerful jutsu to go along with it. One week later, walking through the back alleys of the village. While Naruto had spent most of his free time working on learning water manipulation by making a dry leaf become soaked, he was also learning how ancient Jedi created their swords. It was outlined in his master's texts that were in the ship. Most of the information on the holocron was locked by the object's gatekeeper, and because Naruto was considered a Sith, it would not let him learn anything further. Plagueis had managed to unlock certain information from the holocron, but nothing more than the methods for forging a sword. The process was relatively easy, and Naruto found himself questioning whether or not it was correct. Apparently, all he needed was the desired metal to make the sword from, a furnace, and the force. When going through the ritual that the holocron outlined, he only needed to use and feel the force in order to create his own unique weapon. Naruto was surprised that he didn't actually need to know anything about forging weaponry, as the force was supposed to guide him through the process. Considering how much it cost to get the chakra metal and the fact that he would have to pay to use someone's furnace, Naruto was thankful that he managed to get some extra metal from the starship. He could have made the entire sword from the metal he had from the starship, but the swords of the past were made of rare metals that Naruto didn't have access to. To compensate for that, he would use Sith alchemy to combine the properties of many different metals together. While chakra metal was strong, it was nowhere near as strong as the metals from the starship. However, the chakra metal would enhance any chakra put into it and allow the metal to use nature chakra. The metal from the starship mostly came from the cockpit door, which had been cut open and was now just a useless slab of metal. The Jedi Ritual for creating a sword required a single alloy, which would be the combined metal that Naruto was going to create. The forging of the metal would create a blade that was incredibly durable, razor-sharp, and able to block lightsabers. Naruto also had a Sith ritual that could be used to make the blade even stronger, help it retain its edge, and even act as a focusing point for his dark side powers and perhaps even amplify them. The single blade would be a merging of several different methods and rituals to create a very unique weapon for Naruto. Plagueis was rather interested in what the outcome would be. He had never seen a Sith sword before but had read many different texts concerning them. Naruto only had enough money for the chakra metal and to use the furnace, so he would only have a single attempt until he managed to get more money. He was rather nervous as he had never performed any kind of ritual before or forged a weapon. Plagueis would be there to give him pointers and monitor the process, but only Naruto would be able to perform the rituals, as it had to be his channeling of the force into the metal that would craft the blade and apparently form some kind of bond with him. Plagueis had no idea what the addition of chakra and chakra metal into the process might do or what the final result would be. This would be the first time in possibly several thousand years that a sword would be created using the methods that he had discovered in the scrolls and the holocron. The Jedi had completely stopped using swords almost 4,000 years ago, and the Sith perhaps even a little longer. Not only could Plagueis witness the creation of the blade, but he would be guiding its creation. The weapons shop that Naruto had chosen to forge his sword in was the Higarashi weapons shop and was supposed to be one of the best in the village. Naruto entered the shop and had all the required materials with him and scrolls. Plagueis' holocron was sealed in his arm, and he also had the other holocron sealed in a separate scroll in one of his ninja pouches. Naruto went straight to the counter so he could speak to the owner of the shop. Tenten had a slow day at her family's shop. Nothing really interesting had happened, as she usually liked to help customers choose the weapons and supplies that was right for their needs despite her being only 9. She had been working at the store for a couple of years and had grown up surrounded by weapons and basic ninja supplies of every variety. She was attending the counter and flipping through a supply catalog while her father was in the back of the building working at the furnace. Their shop did sell generic ninja items, but they also made their own weapons to sell to ninja clients in the village. Some people wanted better gear and weapons than the regular ninja items, and their shop could supply them. While turning the next page in her catalog, the bell at the door rang to announce that a customer had entered. Tenten wasn't able to give the customer her standard greeting as the words had died in her throat. She had instantly recognized the boy that had walked into her family's store. It was the same boy that had been skipped ahead a grade into her class. He had stayed in her grade for less than a year before he left the class. Tenten really didn't know that much about him. He was always quiet during class, had no friends, and didn't try to make any friends. The only time she had heard him speak was when asked questions during lecture, and he really liked to ask a lot of questions. Tenten later found out that the reason he had left her class was because he had been skipped ahead another grade. She couldn't understand why he had been skipped ahead, as Hyuga Niji was also in her grade and was considered a genius of his clan, yet he was never offered the chance to skip grades too. No one seemed to know any information about Uzumaki Naruto, which was the boy's name and the most detailed information she knew about him. Anyone that she talked to was tight-lipped about anything that concerned the boy. Even her father wasn't willing to tell her much about him, thought she could tell that he knew something. As the boy walked to the counter, his hood and high collar obscured most of his face. There was always something unnerving about the boy, and it made Tenten shiver as the boy looked at her. Tenten was about to say something when the boy spoke first. "I'd like to speak to the owner of this establishment." The tone of the voice was probably made to sound friendly, but it was dull, and there was an underlying tone of command in it. Tenten was actually rather thankful that she didn't have to speak to him and called for her father. She then stepped back and away from the counter as her father came into the main shop from the back room and walked to the counter. "My name is Tagaru and I own this shop. What is it that I can do for you?" asked the man in a serious voice. He knew who the shadowed figure was, but he wasn't going to turn away a paying customer. "I would like to use your furnace for the rest of the afternoon," said Naruto, and Tagaru raised an eyebrow at the request. He had numerous requests for specialty weapons and customization, but no one had ever asked to use his furnace. "If it's a weapon you want, I can make just about anything," stated Toguru, but Naruto wasn't interested. The weapon is one that I will make myself, I simply need to use your furnace. And before Toguru could object or say anything, Naruto continued, and I'm willing to pay. With that said, Naruto took out a stack of Ryo from his jacket and placed it on the counter. Toguru looked at the money on the table. It was a good amount, but he wasn't sure. He didn't let anyone else touch his tools, but before he could make his concerns known, Naruto spoke again. I brought my own tools, I just need your furnace for the afternoon and a few simple materials. Toguru thought about it. His tools were very important to him, but since the boy wasn't going to use them, then it shouldn't be much of a problem. A boy that young and with no experience making weapons shouldn't be able to make anything. I wonder what he plans on doing? Questioned Toguru. Exactly why do you need my furnace again? Asked Toguru, and Naruto refrained from rolling his eyes. I want to make a weapon and I don't need any help, just a few materials and the use of the furnace. Metal will cost a little bit more than you have on the table. Stated Toguru, and Naruto responded, I already have the metal, I just need a crucible and some materials for the handle as well as a sheath. To say that Toguru was curious was now an understatement. Even Tenten, who was still standing off to the side and watching the negotiation, was very curious about what the boy planned on making. With no prior experience or skills at forging anything, the weapon would most likely be a failure, and Tenten couldn't see any tools or metal on the boy's person. A moment of silence ensued as Naruto and Toguru just looked at each other from across the countertop. It was finally ended when Toguru spoke, you can use my furnace and a crucible, but if anything gets damaged, you're paying for it. You can come to me about handle materials and a sheath after you've made whatever it is you're going to make. Stated Toguru as he took the stack of bills off the table and counted it to see how much it really was. Naruto nodded and proceeded to go to the back room. Toguru was still wary about this deal, but it was a good amount of money and the boy said he only needed the afternoon. It was worth the risk, and unless the boy destroyed his furnace, which was highly unlikely, he would make quite a profit tonight. If anything did happen, he could always go to the Hokage. Naruto shut the door behind him and went to work. He laid out his storage scrolls with the metal, tools, and vibration technology in them and unsealed the first two. A crucible would be used to combine the two chunks of metal that he had together and make them into one single metal with Sith alchemy. He would then perform the required Sith rituals for amplifying the metal and use the Jedi forging method to create the sword. After the sword was complete, he would add in the vibration technology to it, make the handle, and get a sheath for it. Taking the metals, he placed them into the crucible. With some chanting in the ancient Sith language, the process began and he placed the crucible into the furnace, which would begin to melt the metal. The metal from the ship was far stronger and resilient, but the ritual would make it easier to melt. Naruto removed the crucible from the furnace several times to continue the ritual until the metals melted. He poured the force into the crucible and even some of his chakra when he put it in and took it out of the furnace. The molten metal underwent one last ritual session and Naruto then added his own blood into the crucible. The combining ritual had been completed and needed to sit in the furnace for a little while longer. After that was over, Naruto removed the molten metal and poured it into a rectangular mold. The mold would give it a basic shape before it spent time in the furnace and was shaped. After the metal had cooled in the mold, Naruto removed it and put it in a solution of water and his own blood to further cool. The slab of metal was removed and Naruto proceeded to the forging part of the process. The Jedi Ritual began with saying a few phrases in an ancient language that he had memorized and simultaneously adding the force to metal. Despite Naruto never shaping or forging a blade, the ritual would help him along and the force would guide him along the way. Naruto had to mediate with the metal for a given amount of time and create a bond with the metal before he made it into a sword. Naruto had used the force to force air into the furnace and make it much hotter than normal. The rituals he used also seemed to enhance the flame. He placed the metal bar into the furnace and let it sit for a while. The bar was removed from the furnace and shaped with a hammer that Naruto had brought from the ship. The force and some chakra were imbued into the hammer and the metal bar through the tongs Naruto was holding it steady with. Naruto let the force guide him to shaping his blade. He wasn't sure exactly what blade would be created as he was so deep in concentration that he really didn't notice anything around him or the metal he was working with. Even when Plagueis tried to talk with him, he got no response in return. At several points during the forging process, either Toguru or Tenten would open the door and peek through the slit to see what Naruto was up to. Thankfully, the Sith alchemy was already over when they had done this, as it would be strange if they heard him chanting in an unknown language. Plagueis watched enraptured as Naruto continued to shape the blade for hours. The room was filled with the rhythm of hammering and the heat of the furnace. His student seemed to be in a trance and focused solely on his task. Plagueis was able to glean very little from Naruto's mind, as it seemed rather blank at the moment. The only thing Naruto was thinking about was the Jedi Ritual that they had been going over for the past week. Interestingly, the hammering was more than just shaping the blade, as it seemed to push the force into the blade and let the force work on refining the shape and giving the blade an edge. With just a few more sessions of heat and hammering, the sword was done. Naruto put it in the solution of water and blood to cool. He sat down and blinked several times as he had finally come back to reality. From what the holocron said, the blade wouldn't need sharpening and should even come out being so polished that a person could see their reflection in it. Naruto took a pair of tongs and removed it from the water. The sword that came out was rather interesting. The metal appeared to be completely blood red, while the areas near the cutting edge darkened and hardened until it was black. The sword was a ninjato but had half of the back edge of the sword sharpened as well, so it wasn't a completely double-sided sword and featured the standard tip of a ninjato. Naruto and Plagueis took time examining the entire blade. It had no tools marks or imperfections, and Naruto could see his reflection in the blood-red metal. He tested the edge of the blade and found that it was razor sharp. His finger barely made any contact with the edge and now sported a nice cut. When Naruto had finished examining his work, he went to the scroll with the vibration equipment in it. Unsealing the scroll, Naruto attached the technology to the tang of the blade and made sure that it was positioned exactly how it had been on the vibroblade he had taken it from. Naruto had altered this piece of vibration technology to work off of his chakra instead of the battery that it normally had. Once he placed the guard and handle on the blade, no one would know that it was even there. The guard was a piece of metal that he had cut off from the rest before he had started using the furnace. He fitted the guard onto the blade and went to talk with Toguru. Naruto made sure to cover the blade with something so that neither the owner nor his daughter would see the strange technology that was fitted to the handle. The handle of the blade would be covered with wood that had been grown with chakra being fed to the tree. Toguru showed Naruto how to properly make the handle from an example that he had started earlier that day. Naruto carved out enough room for the handles to fit over the vibration technology and then proceeded to wrap the blade with black ray skin. Once everything was in place, he revealed the sword to the others at the shop. He wasn't sure why he did it. Perhaps it was to satisfy their curiosity and so they wouldn't ask questions, or maybe it was just his own hubris at creating such a weapon. The owner was shocked and his daughter was gaping. They had never seen a sword quite like the one that Naruto had made. Several questions were asked, but Naruto merely answered that it was his own creation and therefore he didn't have to tell anyone how he had made it. The owner eyed Naruto wearily as he left the shop, and his daughter was determined to find out more about the blade and how a boy with no training could make one of the most interesting swords she had ever seen. And I placed a simple picture in my profile of the blade. It's made with MS Paint, so don't get your hopes up. It's not a work of art or anything like that. Naruto hadn't made a sheath for his blade, as he just accepted a sheath that Toguru had already created. It would give his weapon the appearance of being ordinary to those who had yet to see it and perhaps give him the element of surprise. Naruto made IFT to his apartment before he promptly passed out on his bed. He hadn't realized how tired he had been until he was already walking home. It had taken him hours to make the blade, but to Naruto it seemed far shorter. The time had passed so quickly during the actual forging because he was so deeply entranced in his work. He would have to test the blade in the morning and find out what it could do. Both he and his master were eager to see what the combination of Sith and Jedi methods could produce. Chapter 6. What it takes to get the team you want. Half a year has passed since the previous chapter. Naruto is 8.5 years old. Dodging several thrown projectiles, Naruto attempted to charge but was once again forced to back off because of the cloth that kept trying to ensnare him. It was a rather annoying jutsu that the kunoichi he was fighting kept using. The cloth followed Naruto's movement and he substituted himself with a log to evade the fabric. He evaluated the situation from above in one of the many tall trees in the Forest of Death. The kunoichi soon found him though, and with a flick of her wrist, the cloth sent the log that she had captured hurtling towards him. With a quick and easy swipe of his red ninjato, the log was cut neatly in two and both pieces missed him. Naruto stared down at the Suna kunoichi while she stared up at him. She now knew that the sword he carried was far deadlier than it should have been. Naruto hadn't expected this much trouble since he had already managed to take a scroll from one genin team today. He only needed a single scroll to pass his master's test, but it had been easy, so he continued in search of another. Both the kunoichi's teammates were already incapacitated, but she was still fighting strong with her cloth techniques. She was perhaps a few years older than Naruto and with 2 red markings on her cheeks. They both eyed each other as both waited for the other to make a move. Naruto really didn't want to kill the girl standing on the forest floor. He had yet to use any of his force abilities as he didn't want anyone to know that he had them unless it was necessary. Taking information from opponents was one thing, but he couldn't modify memory. Naruto wasn't even allowed to be in the Forest of Death because he still had 6 months to go at the academy before he could become a genin. His illegal entry into the Chunin exams was not something that he wanted anyone in the village to find out about, so he couldn't get captured by the kunoichi. He was brought out of his thoughts when the girl acted first and threw 2 kunai with explosive tag at his perch on the tree. Naruto jumped out the way and had to maneuver himself in midair to dodge the length of fabric that came after him. It hit the nearby branch and actually sliced into it, which made Naruto's eyes widen. I didn't know she could sharpen and harden the fabric with chakra in addition to manipulating it to move after me. He realized as he controlled his fall to the ground. The moment Naruto touched the ground, he sprang forward at his opponent, who unrolled more of her cloth from the roll that she kept with her. Naruto swung and cut the cloth several times, which stopped it from snaring him and let him get in closer to fight better. However, the kunoichi was smart and kept her distance from him. Switching tactics, Naruto went through the available list of ninjutsu at his disposal. He did have a few lower-ranking water jutsu that he had learned from the Night Aim scroll. Since getting the scroll, he had mastered the water nature transformation exercises that he had taken from Rokushoai and had time to learn several D-rank and C-rank water jutsu. He hadn't had a chance to start using the larger and more powerful techniques as he had taken time to experiment with the affinity to see what he could do with it. He also didn't have any areas secluded enough that he could practice the larger jutsu without attracting attention to himself. Naruto returned his sword to the sheath over his right shoulder and went through several hand seals. Water release, violent water wave, he said in a whisper and shot an expanding wave of water out of his mouth at his opponent. Though the kunoichi was able to escape the attack, her cloth was drenched and she saw that her opponent was charging her. Naruto moved in with his sword just after the jutsu had finished, to attack at close range. The drenched cloth was much slower and wouldn't be able to catch him. Naruto dodged the cloth, but when he was nearly at his opponent, another roll of cloth shot out from a second roll that she revealed. Naruto was too close to dodge and not fast enough to do anything as the cloth wrapped around him. The kunoichi acted quickly and placed a sealing tag on the bundle of cloth. She watched as the seal took effect, but her eyes widened. The bundle of cloth, deflated in water, pooled out of her cloth. Water clone were her thoughts just as she was hit from behind and knocked out. Naruto stood behind the fallen kunoichi. He had used the jutsu as a distraction to hide while a water clone had moved in to get captured or defeat the kunoichi. Naruto stared at the downed kunoichi and decided against invading her mind and taking her techniques. I would have no use for them, he told himself, and he had no plans on finishing her off. He would just look for a scroll and search the minds of her teammates for jutsu and other techniques. Before Naruto could carry out his plans though, he felt 3 people approaching. He quickly analyzed the situation and noticed a puddle of water from his jutsu and water clone. Naruto smiled as he had an idea. 3 AIM genin landed on a branch nearby and surveyed the forest floor below. They spotted 3 down ninja and the kunoichi of the group. All 3 of them were shinobi and were in the forest trying to gather a second scroll. They were on their own, with no supervision or monitoring of any kind. They approached the unconscious kunoichi cautiously and checked for a pulse. They found one and debated what to do next. It wasn't very often that they came across a pretty girl in the forest. They couldn't decide exactly what to do though and started arguing in hushed voices. About 7 feet away, a small ripple formed on a large puddle of water. A hooded head emerged, followed slowly by a body. Naruto had yet to use this technique in a surprise attack, but it looked like today was the day. The jutsu allowed for a ninja to hide in a body of water, escaping detection and notice. The water could be the ocean, a lake, river, stream, or even something like a very shallow puddle. The depth didn't matter, so long as the surface area was large enough for a person to stand on, then the jutsu could be used. It was similar to an IWA jutsu that allowed a person to hide amongst the rocks without being seen. As Naruto emerged, no water clung to him and he didn't make a sound. He was suppressing his chakra and once fully emerged, his hand moved to his sword. The 3 AIM ninja hadn't noticed him at all. Naruto emerged from the forest of death and hopped the fence surrounding it with a forced jump. The Chunin guard that area of the perimeter was about to say something when Naruto waved his hand and said, "You didn't see anything, continue monitoring the perimeter." The Chunin repeated in a daze, "I didn't see anything. I'll continue monitoring the perimeter." And Naruto sprinted away from the training ground and back to the village. Naruto's thoughts were a jumble and concerned the information that he had taken from the ninja he had encountered in the forest of death. He also idly wondered if the Suna Kunoichi would be able to complete the exam. He had left her team scroll alone and left them the AIM ninja scroll too. He had gotten a few jutsu off the AIM ninja and even learned some basic training techniques in earth-nature transformation. He was content to leave things the way they were, with the AIM ninja beaten senseless, tied together, and left in an area of the forest of death that had much more death than forest. Naruto already had the scroll that he had taken from the first team he encountered, and that was enough to pass his master's test. "That was an interesting performance," said a very familiar voice in Naruto's head. It was at that point that Naruto remembered that his master was sealed in the storage seal on his forearm and had seen the entire test. "How so, master?" Naruto asked with some hesitance and nervousness, while still making his way back to the village at top speed. "You had an opportunity to gain 3 scrolls, yet you didn't. Instead, you helped a group of ninja that you defeated. Was it out of pity that you did it? Or perhaps it was the girl?" inquired Playguys. "I saw no need to kill her. It wouldn't have helped me in any way," stated Naruto. "True. But you also left her teammates perfectly fine, gave them the scrolls they needed to pass, and even protected her from another team. I was also surprised to see that you left those AIM ninja to a rather horrible death. That area you dumped them in was the territory of those extremely large bears and you left them rather bloody," said Playguys to his student. Naruto searched his thoughts and feelings about what he had done during the test and he really couldn't give a very good answer as to why he did it. He couldn't just leave the kunoichi alone in the woods, nor could he let the AIM team do what they had planned on doing. He also wasn't sure why he had helped them pass the exam. It wasn't something that a Sith would do and it would leave the Suna team with questions about who he was and why he helped after fighting them. "Your feelings betray you, my student. You let your emotions take control of you and influence your decisions. You must control your emotions and not let them rule you. The galaxy is not a forgiving or kind place. Despite your strange method of completing the rules of the test, you did procure 1 scroll, which was what the test entailed. Your surprise attacks and strategy for all 3 fights were well planned and executed, though you never fought to your fullest and made it life or death. I would normally say that your overall performance in the test was average, but since you gained a few more jutsu, perhaps it was slightly above average," stated Plagueis. He could feel the conflict in his student but not any fear or regret. Despite rigorous training, Naruto still possessed a set of morals that were not fitting for a Sith. Then again, Plagueis wasn't teaching Naruto in the same manner that he had taught Sidious, so this was the outcome of not completely removing those flaws and emotions from his acolyte. With Sidious, the student and master dynamics were of fear, hatred, and forced loyalty. With Naruto it was more about earned trust and loyalty. Plagueis had paid attention to the boy, told him things no one else would tell him, and had given him training and knowledge when no one else cared. In return, Naruto would help Plagueis in his endeavors, not because he was forced to but because he wanted to. Despite knowing his acolyte for 4 years and even having access to his mind, Plagueis still found it difficult to tell what Naruto would do next. He would not have guessed or predicted that his student would leave the AIM ninja to die and help the Suna ninja to such a degree. On one hand, the boy could be rather ruthless, and on the other, he could be kind and generous. These opposites could never exist for a Sith and should not exist, as it was the Master's job to remove those weaknesses. He found it most interesting that Naruto could be rather ruthless while protecting someone that he didn't know or had just met. The dark side of the Force was influencing Naruto, but not as much as it should have been and as it did with other Sith. A Sith with no control over their emotions could be very dangerous to anyone, but Naruto did possess some control and still held on to his own morals while using the dark side of the Force. Plagueis was interested to see what would become of his acolyte in the coming years and once they were back in the known galaxy. There had been a select few Sith in the past that had held on to their attachments while still being a Sith and using the dark side of the Force. It required great willpower and strong attachments in order to stave off the effects of the dark side of the Force. Usually, a Sith would cast off these connections and perhaps even kill those they were close with in order to turn completely to the dark side. Plagueis wasn't sure that Naruto would ever turn completely to the dark side of the Force, as the boy kept many attachments and wouldn't let go of them. Naruto still had a diminished desire to become Hokage and even help the village, despite Plagueis' efforts to move him away from that dream. Then again, perhaps it was the human element in the test. Usually, these tests would be done on remote locations and the Sith student would be pitted against creatures as well as assassin droids. That was how Plagueis was tested and how he tested Sidious. Naruto would have no trouble destroying assassin droids, but did have concerns taking the life of a living being. Tests such as the one Naruto went through didn't usually involve fighting living beings at the age Naruto was at. The more advanced tests that were given to a Sith student involved living beings, which was either fighting a strong opponents or an assassination. They were administered sometime in the teen to young adult years, but Naruto was advancing in the practical aspects of a Sith much faster than anyone his age should have been. It was because of this and other reasons that Plagueis would be using one of those more advanced tests in a few months and was interested to see what would happen. He had a feeling through the Force that the success of the test would help create the opportunities they had been waiting for. Over 5 months later, a few days before the Academy exam for graduation. Naruto is now 9 and the current year is 40 BBY. At the secret hideout. Naruto was kneeling in front of his master's holocron. Plagueis had been working on a plan for team placement for some time now, and apparently, he was now going to reveal it to Naruto. As you know, the Academy graduation exam is in a week's time. You have been doing slightly worse in your Academy classes to put you out of the top spot in the class. When I looked into the Chunin teachers' minds, I saw that the Rookie of the Year is usually placed with the lowest Academy member and the smartest female ninja. I don't want you to be placed on a team like this, as it would not help you. From meditating, I have felt through the Force that it would be better to place you on a different team, one that is not in the Academy," said Plagueis as he began to reveal his plans. A month ago, Plagueis had him break into the records room in the Hokage Tower in order to look through the current genin teams of the village. This must be the reason for that information-gathering mission. So, Master intends for me to be placed on a current genin team? How will that work out? None of them had openings. Realized Naruto as he searched through his memories of the different genin teams his master had him look through. Playguys could feel through their connection that Naruto was already piecing together his plan, but the boy lacked one detail. The current genin teams of the village do not have any openings.
So, you will have to create an opening, stated Playguys with finality, and Naruto's eyes widened as he put together what his master was referring to. He would have to assassinate a genin of the village in order to create an opening for himself. Naruto spent most of the next day following one of the two possible targets. Both were on the same genin team along with a third genin. The whole team ranged from 6 to 10 years older than him and had been genin for around 5 to 7 years. The two teammates that Naruto was shadowing were not very gifted ninja. Both were 19 years old and had taken the Chunin exam several times, failing each time. The final member of the group was 4 years younger at 15 and had taken the genin exam fewer times while graduated the academy at an earlier age than his teammates. Playguys didn't want Naruto to go after the smarter and more proficient genin, as that would be more detrimental to the team. Instead, he was going after the lesser members as it would be easier and allow Naruto to integrate onto the team faster. While Playguys had chosen the team and the two genin, Naruto had to make the decisions of which one he was going to kill and how he would go about doing it. From what he could tell from their files, each genin had a specific skill that was known to them which wasn't a nature jutsu. They didn't have any family in or outside the village. The only member that did have family was the member of the team that Playguys had not chosen. At the end of the day, Naruto sat down in the hideout to meditate on the possibilities of which person he would kill. It was a difficult prospect as he had never directly killed anyone before and was conflicted about it. He would wait until a few days before the exam so that the Hokage was faced with making the team decisions at the academy as well as filling in someone to take the place of the genin he would kill. Having both on his mind at the same time would likely cause Hokage to think about filling in the incomplete genin squad with a fresh genin. Naruto would be a likely candidate as he had moved up through the academy and was gifted beyond the other students. They were using Naruto's trouble with creating the clone technique as a cover for the slight drop in his grades. The Sandaime was a man of tradition and would no doubt keep the same team formation for the Rookie of the Year. That would leave Naruto as the odd person out because he was still very gifted and the class had one more student than it should have because Naruto skipped ahead so many grades. There was the chance that the Sandaime wouldn't put Naruto on the more experienced team, but that was unavoidable unless they tried to persuade the Sandaime, which was out of the question. The man may have been old, but they weren't going to try and trick him. Mind tricks only worked on the weak-minded and weak-willed, so it was likely they wouldn't work on the veteran Hokage. The plan was risky, as Naruto would have to kill a genin and make sure to not leave any evidence or get caught in the act. There was no one to partially pin the blame on this time as neither genin had any close ties with the village, family, or really any enemies. Playguys also wouldn't let Naruto do what he had done the last time and erase the person's memory. Naruto had to kill this time. Naruto was having trouble dealing with the fact that he would have to kill someone without the assurance that the death would help his team placement. The other times his actions had led to the deaths of others were for a very good reason and it wasn't actually him personally doing the killing. This situation was very different. It was a test from his master and he didn't want to fail. The two genin he was to choose from were rather different and it was difficult to decide one over the other. Naruto was far more interested in the special technique of one of the genin more than the other. However, if he was led on that team, he couldn't let them know that he knew the technique of their deceased teammate. That would lead to questions he didn't have answers to. This led Naruto to choosing based on which person was less beneficial for the team. When he thought about it that way, one of the genin stood out as the person that was the weaker link. The following night, Naruto once again walked the shadowy streets of Konoha in his black all-weather cloak from the starship. He hadn't worn it since he had stolen the Raijin and the scroll. It was currently pouring in the village and most people were either indoors or in some kind of shelter. Few ninja were outside during lightning storms as they carried so much metal with them and often jumped across the tops of buildings to travel through the village. Naruto moved soundlessly through the alleyways of the village. He had memorized them years ago and knew the best route to get to the apartment that he was going to. It wasn't long before Naruto spotted the apartment complex he was after.
Pulling down his goggles, he searched for the floor that he was after and found the target's apartment. The light was on, which wasn't that strange as it wasn't that late. He wasn't sure whether it was better to sneak in after the genin was asleep or just the direct approach and go in now. He thought to ask his master, whose holocron was sealed on his arm, but this was supposed to be his test and he wasn't going to fail or ask for help. Naruto didn't really like to wait, despite his master telling him that he needed more patience, so he decided to go now. He would rather get what he had come there to do over with and not wait. He could feel his target in the apartment on the 4th floor and he made his way into the building. He could tell when the lighting would strike, so he hid in the shadows during those strikes. The alleys were dark enough for him to walk without being seen, but the lightning illuminated everything. He also suppressed his chakra so no one would detect him. It took a couple of minutes to move through the shadowy areas to the building that he wanted while making sure that he was hidden from the flash of the lightning and he couldn't be spotted by anyone. Naruto wasn't about to try and get access to the apartment from the outside, though he had thought about it. There were too many variables and he would have to get in through the window, which was too difficult. He did have another option, and it was an interesting discovery with one of his water jutsu. Naruto made his way to the side entrance of the apartment building. It was locked, but he didn't need a key. With a wave of his hand, the door unlocked and opened for him. He walked through and it shut soundlessly behind him and locked itself. He looked at his cloak and noticed the amount of water that he had on it. With a few hand seals, the water that was on his clothes fell to the floor and collected in a small puddle. Naruto pulled out a half-full bottle of water from his cloak. He bent down and, using his chakra, gathered the water into a perfect sphere in his hand. Naruto then used his chakra to siphon the water into the bottle, leaving it almost full. He had gotten rather good with his water manipulation. Naruto put the bottle back in his cloak as he would need it later and then made his way through the building. He couldn't feel anyone but tried to keep his chakra suppressed regardless. He came out of a service entrance or janitorial area and into the main entrance area for the building. Passing by a group of mailboxes, he found the staircase. No one was in the staircase or about to use it, so he silently walked to the 4th floor. When he got to the 4th floor, Naruto opened the door and walked into the hallway. There were many apartments on this level and Naruto knew the one he wanted and the best way to get into it. He reached back into his cloak and pulled out the water bottle. He bent down and gently poured it to the floor so it made a good-sized puddle that was just right for what he needed to do with it. Naruto stood up, pocketed the bottle and gently stepped onto the puddle. With a few hand seals, he sank into the puddle. It was a simple jutsu that he had used before, but while using it he had discovered something. Naruto used the force and the puddle began to move down the hallway. It was the simultaneous use of the force and chakra for the jutsu that created an interesting effect. Normally the jutsu was just used to hide in any body of water and move through it, but the smaller the body of water, the less you could move around. So with just a puddle, Naruto was stationary while in the puddle. With the force, however, he could now move the puddle. The water jutsu allowed for someone to hide not only themselves but their chakra as well. Only a chakra sensor could even detect his presence while he was using that jutsu. The puddle moved down the hallway and approached the door of his target. Naruto was able to use the puddle to bypass the door entirely as he could slip in the small space between the bottom of the door and the floor. Before he went into the apartment, Naruto stopped the puddle and used the force to sense the genin. Apparently he was in the kitchen and eating dinner or a snack. Naruto quickly moved the puddle into the apartment and hid in the kitchen. The apartment was rather nice and better than Naruto's. He knew that some ninja apartments in the village were just a single room, but this one wasn't. The genin wasn't paying attention, so Naruto moved the puddle underneath the table. He knew the genin hadn't spotted him at all, so he slowly moved around behind the genin's chair. The puddle was positioned directly behind the genin sitting in the chair. Ninja could be very sensitive to the presence of others besides just chakra. The more experienced the ninja, the more they could feel objects coming or someone approaching them. It was really a combination of several senses that gave this extra feeling.
The last time he had entered an apartment and attacked a ninja, he had been rather lucky that no one had heard the scuffle and that he managed to stop the ninja from shouting or attacking him. This time he would be more careful and learn from his previous mistakes. The puddle didn't even leave a wetness or trail behind as it passed over the surfaces in the hallway and apartment. Naruto moved out of the puddle at a slow pace so as not to alert the genin in front of him. The light was situated above the table so he would not cast a shadow. His head, then neck, and finally the rest of his body emerged out of the puddle. Before the genin even knew that something was wrong, Naruto's hand reached forward and grabbed his head. The glasses-wearing genin froze, everything started going black, and he felt pain but was unable to scream. Naruto had gotten better with the drain knowledge technique and quickly searched for any information that might be interesting. It was as he first thought, the genin really didn't have jutsu that would be useful to him, especially the one that he was known for, which was called the soft physique modification technique. Through a medical procedure, it allowed him to dislocate all his joints and fit into tight spaces while using chakra to stretch, twist, and contort any part of his body. It was interesting but of no use to Naruto. While looking through information about the genin's teammates, he found something much more interesting than he thought he would. It appeared that the genin, along with his two teammates, were all spies for Orochimaru of the Sannin. Naruto and even Plagueis hadn't expected this turn of events. Plagueis had just selected a genin team that weren't very good, but also had taken the Chunin exams before. Because the team was only average, there was more of a chance that a fresh genin would be put on their team, and since they had already taken the Chunin exams, there was a good chance that they would take it again in a short amount of time. Neither suspected that the team would all be spies for a missing nin, save for the Jonin sensei. It appeared that the Jonin wasn't a spy or knew about his genin team being spies. Tsurugi Misumi, the genin Naruto had chosen, was the weaker genin in the group, but the other genin he could have chosen wasn't that much stronger. It turned out that the final group member was at least Jonin level and also worked far more closely with Orochimaru than the other two. Naruto asked his master for instructions as he was no longer sure what to do. Plagueis thought about the predicament and the possible outcomes that could arise. It might be more dangerous for Naruto to be on a team like this, but it could also lead to more opportunities, and since the other two members were spies and one of them hiding his true skills, it might be easier for Naruto to hide his true skills as well. Naruto also had information about them, so it could be used to his advantage if the other members discovered anything about him. Finding out more about Orochimaru might be worth it as well. They knew little about the Sannin and only what was told in class. According to Misumi's mind, Orochimaru planned to gather and learn all the jutsu in the world. The Snake Sannin was also creating his own hidden village in a country bordering Fire Country. They also learned of a small base that he had in Sea Country where a scientist was working on creating the ultimate underwater warrior. Misumi only knew so much of the Snake Sennin's plans and power base, however the other teammate, Yukushi Kabuto, knew much more. The more they found out about Orochimaru through the mind of the genin, the more Plagueis thought that the man was the chakra equivalent of a Sith. Orochimaru possessed many of the same aspirations of a Sith, and he quickly became a person of interest to Plagueis. Coming back to the situation at hand. It was risky but worth it to continue and try to become part of the genin squad. Naruto had just about finished going through all of the memories on jutsu, the genin squad, spying on the village, and Orochimaru. There was nothing more that could be gained from the genin sitting at the table. "Continue with the test, my student," said Plagueis over the connection, and Naruto nodded though was still unsure about committing the act. Naruto used force grip to keep Misumi in the chair and from talking. It wasn't necessarily needed as the genin was still going in and out of consciousness from the drain knowledge used on his mind. Reaching up over his right shoulder, Naruto grasped the handle of his ninjato and pulled it from its sheath. He steadied himself and tried to keep his hand from shaking while gripping his sword. A slight buzz or hum came from the sword as Naruto put some chakra into the handle to activate the vibration technology. He hesitated for only a moment, then with a single horizontal swing it was over. Naruto sheathed his sword and stared at the body in front of him. With the force grip, the body had been sitting perfectly still in the chair.
The sword gave no resistance and the head actually stayed on the neck. The only indication that the person in front of him was dead was a few thin lines of blood from the neck and the lack of life signs that he could sense through the force. Everything in the room was quiet and Naruto wasn't sure why the body hadn't fallen, why the head hadn't come off, or why the wound wasn't bleeding profusely. It was rather eerie, and the scene as well as his actions made him feel very sick. I think your use of force grip when killing him caused his body to seize up and stay that way. You should leave the area immediately. There is nothing else that can be gained here. Stated Plagiuise, and Naruto came back to reality. He went through hand seals and sunk back into the puddle and then moved back the way he came. Naruto siphoned the water from the puddle back into the bottle and went down the stairs. He checked to make sure that no one was there and left through the same door he entered. Moving through the alleyways, Naruto made his way back to his house and took a long path to do it. He was already using a technique to hide his scent, but he had just killed a genin of the village, so he had to be sure. The rain would wash everything away, Naruto thought. His eyes widened slightly at that thought and Naruto went through the same set of hand seals as he did in the apartment building. He slipped into one of the many puddles that had formed from the rainstorm, then used the force to move away from the crime scene and back to his apartment through the puddles of Konoha. The next day, apartment building of Tsurugi Nasumi. The Sandaime entered a fourth-floor apartment that was now the scene of a murder. Without the Uchiha military police, the village had to use ANBU in order to take care of any problems inside the village involving ninja. From what little details the Sandaime had, a genin had been murdered in his apartment and apparently the death was rather strange. This was actually the first murder in the village since the Uchiha clan had been wiped out. Unless the suspicious death of Uchiha Shisui was counted, it had been years since a murder took place in Konoha. The Sandaime was asked by Marino Ibiki to come down and take a look. The Sandaime looked around at the apartment out of habit from years of being a ninja. He examined the room before walking to Ibiki at the table. The apartment was small but had everything that one person needs, a kitchen/dining area, bathroom, and bedroom. Nothing seemed out of place in the room, and the only thing that the Sandaime noted that was strange was the body that Ibiki was standing next to. The body was sitting in the chair and staring straight forward as if the person wasn't really dead. The Sandaime noted some blood and bruising around the neck, but no real marks were present. Report, requested the Sandaime. The genin is Tsurugi Nasumi, age 19. We found no signs of forced entry and the body is exactly how it was found by a member of his genin squad. We're checking their alibis now. From what we can tell, the time of death was late last night from a single attack to the neck. No fingerprints, no tracks, no scent, no witnesses, no noises, and nothing has been touched or taken as far as we can tell. The Sandaime sighed as he inspected the genin. It was rather sad to see any of his ninja die, but the state of the ninja before him seemed to make the situation much more depressing. This genin wasn't noteworthy, but he cared about all his ninja, the skillful or the ones never made it past genin. You said a single wound to the neck? Asked the Sandaime as he could see some blood and bruising but not really enough to warrant death. He supposed the attack must have broken the neck or severed the spine. Ibiki nodded and put his hand on the body's head. Grabbing the hair, he lifted up and the head just came right off the neck with ease. The Sandaime stared at the wound as it was more extensive than he originally thought. Such a clean cut and the head didn't come off the neck. He thought as his mind went through techniques which he knew or heard of that could have done something like this. Ibiki set the head back down on the neck. Was he restrained in some way, or was the body held in place until rigor set in? Asked the Sandaime and Ibiki answered, not that we can find. What do you think could do something like this? Asked the Sandaime curiously as he wanted Ibiki's opinion. The only things I can think of are wind or lightning jutsu. It would have to have been a very sharp technique that did this, far sharper than any blade. It was such a clean cut that barely any blood escaped the wound. All of the bleeding was internal around the neck area. It must have been fast, a single swing or single technique.
I don't know many lightning techniques that could do this except very advanced vibration of a special blade, and I don't know of anyone that knows that kind of technique in the village. As for wind jutsu, they are far more likely for something like this. It could have been a jutsu, but there was no damage to the apartment, which suggests a blade. The blade must have been chakra metal, as I don't know as a kunai infused with wind chakra could do this. I don't know many people who can use wind chakra like that. Also, there is no blood spatter anywhere. Only a few people in the village are skilled enough to do something like this with wind chakra. Stated Ibiki, and the Sandaime knew the list as well. His son Asuma was on it, as well as his old teammate Danzo. However, he couldn't believe that either of those men would want to kill this genin. Can you put together a list of suspects? The Sandaime asked, and Ibiki nodded. The Sandaime left the room with a heavy sigh. He really didn't like where this case was headed. He knew Asuma was innocent and wouldn't do something like this, but Danzo was another story. He knew Danzo would be capable of something like this, but he doubted the man would actually do it himself. That left a short list of suspects that could use wind nature chakra or could use lightning nature chakra. The problem was that the Sandaime didn't think that anyone on that list would have committed this crime. 2 days later, Academy graduation. Naruto sat in his seat with his forehead protector tied around his arm. He still had his goggles on his forehead, and he wasn't about to replace his invention with a piece of engraved metal. Naruto would have to wait until the following day in order to learn what team he had been placed on, and couldn't help but wonder if there was anything he could do to convince the Sandaime to put him with the team he had created an empty spot on. Everything he did a few days ago would have been pointless if the Sandaime didn't put him on that team. Naruto hadn't been the rookie of the year and had come in second place, which was exactly what he was supposed to do. He had spent the previous day going over with his master everything that they had learned from Tsurugi about Orochimaru. It was a good amount of information. Unfortunately, none of it helped them at this point in time. Plagueyes wasn't about to work with another Sith or help him. The laboratory in Sea Country was interesting but not really useful. However, the scientist there might be skilled enough to help their plans if he was knowledgeable about chemistry. They still needed to make fuel or find an alternative source, and it would depend on how skilled the man was. Kabuto was interesting as well. He was far stronger than anyone in the village would guess and possessed incredibly knowledge of biology and medicine, but was also completely loyal to Orochimaru. Naruto couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier in the week. The death of Genin at his hands was still in his memories. Plagueyes thought it may have been unwise to use the sword on the Genin, but what was done was done. Naruto had heard several people talk about the sword that he had created in a weapons store, but it was mostly academy students that talked about it. Unfortunately, he couldn't do much about the store owner and his daughter. The Sith didn't really possess any memory modification techniques, at least not that Naruto knew. What had happened to Rokusho was a side effect of delving too deeply into someone's mind, which was the erasing of memories. It happened with those who had not mastered the technique or tried to go too far. Naruto had purposely done it to Aoi, and he had no control over which memories were erased or how much was erased. He also couldn't use any mind tricks, because they are really only good for a quick usage and not for several hours of use. Even if he had done something to modify their memories, they would have wondered what happened to the whole afternoon. Naruto was pulled out of his thoughts when he heard the sounds of everyone packing up to leave. The class was over. It was difficult to concentrate in the room because everyone was celebrating, and he kept partially reading the minds of the people near him. It wasn't really mind reading, as he just gleaned brief bits of information, feelings, or emotions from the people around him. It could be rather disorienting if he didn't block them out. He was still learning to control it and had difficulty when so many people were around him and experiencing strong emotions and thoughts. Naruto left the class last and walked down the hall to leave. He passed several people and heard bits and pieces of what they were currently thinking about. It wasn't until one white-haired chunin passed Naruto that he heard a thought that caught his full attention. Orochimaru. It was just a single word, but it caused Naruto to forget everything else around him. Naruto turned to look at the man whose mind he had heard the thought from. He was a chunin with straight white hair, but Naruto didn't know his name and he had never seen the man at the academy before. He could feel some anger and frustration coming from the man along with a sense of reverence for the name he was thinking about. Naruto knew most of the teachers as he had been in many classes in his years at the academy, but he never had this chunin for a teacher. He couldn't help but wonder why the chunin would be thinking about Orochimaru. "Follow him," ordered Plagueyes, and Naruto complied. He turned around and pushed his way through the rest of the student traffic while not losing the man's signature. He finally got through the crowd and followed the chunin to the teacher's lounge. Naruto couldn't stand outside the teacher's lounge because it would look suspicious, so he ducked into a nearby classroom. The classroom was empty and Naruto sat down on one of the benches while opening a random scroll from his bag. If anyone came in, they would just think he was reading. Using force listen, he was able to hear exactly what was being said in the room. "So, you're teaching at the academy now, Mizuki?" asked Irika, as he was happy to see his longtime friend. Both Irika and Mizuki had become chunin together, but Irika had stopped doing missions in favor of teaching full-time several years ago, while Mizuki still wanted to strive for Jonin rank. Mizuki put on a fake smile to cover his distaste for his friend and said, "It looks like it. Maybe we'll be teaching the same class as I'm only an assistant right now." The only reason he had come back to academy was due to suspicious circumstances on his last mission. Mizuki wasn't satisfied with being an academy teacher and wanted to increase his rank. He was willing to do anything to rise in the village and become more powerful. In his last mission, one of his comrades had gotten injured and Mizuki had killed him so as not to slow the team down and complete the mission. The body was eventually recovered and the death was ruled as suspicious, so Mizuki had been suspended from missions and was under investigation. It wasn't the first time something like that had happened on a mission, and it was enough to get people, including the Hokage, suspicious of his actions and mission record. The whole situation pissed him off as he felt that he had done the right thing. He wasn't going to tell anyone that. The only thing he could do until the suspension was lifted was to teach at the academy or do missions inside the village. While he hated the academy, the students, and Irika, he would rather work there than be stuck on meaningless tasks around the village. In Mizuki's mind, he wasn't going to be bound by morals and teamwork like the other idiots of Konoha and was willing to do anything and sacrifice anything to achieve his goals. That was the reason that he was noticed by Orochimaru on his last mission. The Snake Sannin had apparently been in the area and seen Mizuki kill his teammate. Orochimaru was impressed with Mizuki and had given him the key to power. Mizuki had yet to figure out what the key was exactly, as it was just a few pieces of paper with a formula and symbol on it. It would take time to figure out what it was, but he had plenty of time with his suspension. Believing that Orochimaru was the only person who could understand him and would give him the power that he sought, Mizuki had started to plan on what to do with the power he could gain, but no matter what it was, he knew it probably wouldn't be enough for him. That meant that he would have to think about getting more power. The only person Mizuki could see giving it to him was of course Orochimaru. Unfortunately, Mizuki knew that the Snake Sannin wouldn't just give him more power. He would need to give Orochimaru something in return. It didn't take Mizuki long to figure out what might interest a man like Orochimaru, as he knew the only thing in the entire village that would interest the Snake Sannin was the Forbidden Scroll of Seals. Mizuki had no idea how he would get the scroll and be able to leave the village, but he had plenty of time to think about it. Naruto listened to the conversation between the two teachers for almost half an hour. They conversed about various topics, none of which interested him. Mizuki didn't say anything further about Orochimaru but did talk about how he was suspended from active duty due to suspicious circumstances on his last mission. Naruto could pick up on several emotions that Mizuki was feeling during the conversation. The first and foremost was that Mizuki hated Irika and was only talking to him because he would be working at the academy for the foreseeable future. If Naruto was in the room, he may have been able to pick up on more of the man's thoughts. That was out of the question, though, as he couldn't go into the teacher's lounge and couldn't pick up on those thoughts through a wall. Naruto was starting to think that perhaps it had just been a stray thought that he had sensed, but then why had the teacher thought about the name with such reverence?
The anger and frustration could be explained as not being directed at Orochimaru but at the situation with the academy and investigation. The more Naruto thought back to what he had felt at the time, the more he thought that Mizuki held the snake Sannin in higher regards than anyone in the village. It seemed very strange as nearly the entire village felt the exact opposite for Orochimaru. The only people that Naruto encountered that felt similar as Mizuki were the genin team of spies that were working for Orochimaru. That brought up the thought that perhaps Mizuki was a spy as well. Perhaps the investigation was due to the Hokage believing that Mizuki had ties to Orochimaru. That thought didn't fit with what he knew from the genin team though. From the memories of Musumi, Naruto didn't find any evidence of another spy in the village or any information on Mizuki. It was possible that Musumi was just not informed about such things as the genin was rather low on the spying and information totem pole when it came to Orochimaru. Yakushi Kabuto was much higher than anyone else, so it was possible that the lower spies working for Orochimaru didn't know about Mizuki. "What should we do, Master?" asked Naruto through their connection. "I don't believe that this Mizuki is a spy. It is possible that Orochimaru still has followers in the village that aren't actually aligned with him or have contact with him. However, the teacher may have more knowledge about Orochimaru than the genin spy, so it would be beneficial to search his mind. It wouldn't be wise to leave another dead body and we should wait for a while before acting. You will be paying Mizuki a visit soon and will be searching his mind and destroying his memories like Rokusho Aoi. The information obtained could be valuable," concluded Playguys. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.